agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Next up, reports from superintendent and staff.
Good morning to everyone. We have a full plate with some pretty big ticket items. The first one, for the past 4 years, we've contracted with Dr. Charles Coffron to do enrollment projections. Alex, this is new to you. I kind of shared a little bit more about it at our planning meeting, but Dr. Coffron does this work all around the country, but he also does it with some few districts nearby. What he does is he looks at the number of children that are born within the district boundaries and specifically within the boundary lines of a school. And he projects how many of those students will enter the school based on the number of kids who ultimately enter 5 years later. So he's not following individual kids and their, John Smith all the way to kindergarten, but maybe 420 kids were born in 2000, then in 2005, 370 kids entered kindergarten. His projections have been pretty reliable and accurate over the course of our use of his projections. So I gave you the really big, meaty document that he produces annually that kind of breaks down the historical trend over multiple years, shows projections 5 years out. And I just wanted to, for purposes of today, and it's certainly, again, highlighting the rationale for why last year we went to the voters to help relieve space in our elementary schools. So up here is a graph, and these first two graphs, kudos to Cooperative Strategies, Scott's also here to present on the boundary lines today, highlight our current boundary scenarios, our current school scenarios, and so I'll just kind of walk you across this right here. First of all, the capacity of the school. Pam and her team over the past few years have developed the capacity of the school. Capacity based on the number of available classrooms, the number of classrooms in a school that could be used for classroom use, gen ed use, like first grade, second grade, and we multiply that by our average class size. That column right there shows capacity, and we took off the modulars. Certainly the modulars have an effect on capacity, but we've said, especially last year as we were talking about a bond issue, that while they've served their purpose, a good purpose, it's not, we don't want to keep our children in modulars for reasons related to their disconnect to the community and a variety of other factors. So that column right there shows the capacities with no modulars. To the right is the attend count. That's how many children are currently attending that school. And to the right of that is the utilization. Based on the capacity and the attendance, are we utilizing the buildings as we should, or are we over or underutilizing them? We can see here, based on the attend utilization, that we are grossly overutilizing 4 of our schools and currently underutilizing 2 of them. The column to the right is the children who don't live within our school system but attend those schools. That encompasses or includes both our students who participate in the Voluntary Student Transfer Program, the VIC program. There's approximately about 15 of those students in our elementaries, as well as non-resident staff who bring their children. That's the bulk of those numbers. To the right of that is the live-in count, and that is how many, if we sent everybody to, they had to go to school at the school that they were zoned for, what would be the size of that school? And that's kind of it right there. Avery would go from 491 to 500, Bristol 472 to 490, and as such. Again, consistent to the right, we would be even more utilizing our schools. And the high school in Hickson and Steer are down below.
And the live-in count takes off those who attend from out of district.
Correct. So those percentages would go up even more if we added in the attend from outside of our district.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying. This graph right here, what this shows is kind of a live and attend analysis, and it's looking at how many kids are attending a school for which they live in, how many of them transfer out, transfer in. So looking at, and on the left side, you have the live-in. So they're zoned for this school. So let's just start the easy one at the top, Avery Elementary. Or let's go to Bristol. So if Bristol, if we look at there, we can see that when we line up the horizontal and the vertical columns, 412 of the students at Bristol Elementary also live in the Bristol Elementary zone. Okay? 13 of the students who are zoned for Avery attend Bristol. That's where that 13 number comes from. 22 of the students that are zoned for Clark attend Bristol.
Other way around, John.
Other way around? You
So-
explain it.
Sorry.
No.
So there's 490 kids that live in Bristol. 412 live in and attend Bristol, and we have 13
yeah.
kids that live in Bristol that go to Avery. 22 live in Bristol and go to Clark. 2 live in Bristol, go to Edgar Road, and 6 live in Bristol and go to Hudson, and 35 live in Bristol and go to Gibbons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On the right, the percentage of the kids that transfer out. So again, Scott, correct me, Avery School, 8% of the kids that live in Bristol, which is 500, transfer out.
Right.
Because 8% of 40 is 8% of 500. Okay? So on the right are the transfer out percentages. Down below the bottom column at the very bottom is the transfer in percentages. Okay? So these are some of the highlights from the enrollment projections, and what I did is I just gave you, based on his enrollment, based on our enrollment and our projections from the data that he put together last year, I showed you side by side what it looked like last year when he showed us the graph and what it looks like now. So the graph on the left, total resident enrollments projections, shows 2007 with 2017 birth data. That's the particular trend line. You can see that pretty consistent moving out with both. The one thing I do want to show right here is the top represents last year's table that he shared. The bottom is this year's. So if you look at last year, he projected resident enrollment, which is, and let's just say K-5 resident enrollment to be at 1992. That was what he projected. You come to the chart down below where you have the actuals in white. Resident enrollment K-5 is 2004. You with me on that? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So similarly, 1920 he projected resident enrollment K-12, the bottom column at the top at 4326. This year, our total resident enrollment in 1920 K-12 is 4,344. So you can see back last year, based on, because he bases the projections on birth data, then how many kids enter and end up attending. So the projections adjust annually. So last year he projected our 22-23 kindergarten, I'll show it up here. He projected our 22-23 kindergarten, our K-12 enrollment to be at 4,416. Now he projects it at 4,425, so moving up. This is a look at the birth data. Again, the difference in the charts from year to year. You can see that we have had over the past few years a decline in the enrollment in the births. That sometimes corresponds to a decrease in enrollment, sometimes it doesn't. Just because we don't have the data with how many children move into our system. So sometimes, based on the kids that show up, it's over his projections significantly, and sometimes it could be below, okay? But this will show kind of what the projections are. And this is the K-5 resident enrollment. Again, just resident enrollment, not including VIC, not including non-resident staff. The changes from the last round of projections to this round of projections. Pretty consistent. You'll notice the some of the lines that are narrowing a little bit, but still the data is pretty consistent. So the summary points really from this is that our resident enrollment is up a percent from what we projected last year, from what he projected last year. Again, right here, reading it to you, the mid 5-year average and SNAP projection series are forecasting that we're going to continue to see increases in enrollment with a definite peak based on projections in 22-23. We do see a dip based on the births of the kids coming into our system, but those births was what he tells us is getting us back to where we are today. So it's not like all of a sudden the floor is going to fall out from under us and we're going to have like any kind of space necessarily. And again, the district birth rates have declined. They've declined for 2 years, and then he's projecting that they decline in the 3rd year as well. Questions related to any of this data or any of that?
I have a question about utilization. So I know in some of the buildings, there are classrooms within the walls that weren't intended to be classrooms. Are those counted as classrooms for utilization? Or are you kind of going back to what you would like the building to look like?
We're kind of starting for what we would want the building to look like and what services should be in the building.
Okay.
So there have been scenarios where a classroom has been carved up for different purposes, but it really should be a classroom. So for example, at Clark Elementary, we have rooms that have been carved up for special programming and special school district. Ideally, once we are able to reduce the capacity of the school, remove the modular, free up some space, that would be repurposed back for a classroom.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I understand that this is based on birth data, right? So
Mhm.
projections based on number of students being born in our district. Can you just briefly talk about some of the other factors that might affect our enrollment? You know, we made decisions recently involving, for instance, we do allow our staff to have kids, bring their kids to school even if they don't live in the district. I don't foresee that changing.
Yeah.
Are there other considerations that could affect these numbers?
What we have seen, and the data is out there, it's available for anyone. It was shared, last year I think it was at Ed Plus, that over a significant period of time, I think starting in 2009 up to whenever they shared that data, that we had seen more children enter our schools from private parochial than any school in the St. Louis region other than Afton. And so, yes, and our trends, again, it looks a little bit differently, and often we look at those transition points. So we look at a lot of times at the high school, like when some of our parents and families will make choices to go to private schools. Sometimes the number of students that we take in far exceeds the number of students that go out. And those are families that are coming from private and parochial. So I think that's a big factor. So we have to continue just to monitor happening in schools. And some of that 2009 shift was based on economy too. And I even have neighbors in my own neighborhood who are like, they made the decision based on the financial side, and then they got here and they realized what a great school system we have, and I'm already kind of paying for it. And they told their friends, and they just stayed, and they continued to stay. So
I also think about young families who perhaps buy a home in the city, then decide we don't want to send our kids to St. Louis Public, we don't want to send our kids to parochial schools, and so they're looking to, I think my point is, I think that Webster, because of its reputation as a good school district, attracts people to move here, and that migration isn't reflected in those numbers.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we need to think about as well, because I don't think that's going to change.
That's true.
As long as we keep doing a good job.
You're right. And that's one of the things. Last year, there was a focus group that had real estate agents in it, and that was one thing. And we all know it as residents of the district community, is that houses they fly off the market. They are sold by the time the sign is in the yard, a lot of them. And I know we received some kind, or the city received some kind of note, Kathy, you remember this, but they received some kind of, the city of Webster Groves, not our entire district, 5 cities, but some kind of accolade, and it was a part of that was based on the quality of education that the district's able to provide, so a lot of factors.
Are there trends, like, is there like, do we see an influx of students in the middle school, like, so they'll do elementary school and parochial school and then come over here, you know what I'm saying, is there like a trend like that we can base some sort of data on?
Yeah, I don't have that, but I have looked at that before, and again, it's kind of, I'd have to see which way how that trend looks, and I can't say that I can do that right now, but I'll do that. Again, sometimes we lose more, and sometimes we gain more. I do know that. High school's the big marker, but then middle school can also be a time as well.
So the most stress in the system is It's 22, 23, is that right?
Based on the projections.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then this is the current stress, like as of
Right.
this year's enrollment?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And this kind of shows you right here. And resident enrollment, just because we don't have a lot of kids that participate in VIC at this point, we don't have that many non-resident staff that's in their children to school here. I think we probably have about 80 overall. The resident enrollment projections, actual, kind of follows what our trends are. So you could see even in 13-14, we're looking at 4,138, and this year we're over 200 more than that. So, and we're projected to end up in 22-23 at over 100 more than we are right now. Yeah.
So with and this might be getting into one of the next agenda items, but with the boundary lines being redrawn, are we looking at the 22-23 year when we're looking at those boundary lines to see, like, under the most stress, like what the utilization is going to look like?
That is a good question. I would say that I think projections are being considered. I think the one thing that we are kind of in a wait and see mode is we just don't know until, and we're gonna have a survey that goes out to start to get a little bit of preliminary data related, but how many of the families are gonna stick in their current, because none of the children in their schools in 2021 will have to leave. And so, we could project classroom enrollment or school enrollment as if they were all going to stay. But again,
and maybe just projecting if there was no grandfather. I mean, I don't know. I'd just be curious to see, if we're redrawing these boundary
Yeah.
lines and things were to work out, the way they will hopefully be intended to
yeah,
at some point.
yeah,
I'd just be curious if the boundary lines would be able to handle, the most
yeah.
capacity we've seen.
We had said, and Scott and his team last year projected, and we told people that we would see, expect to see an increase of, in some situations, 2 to 3 kids per class, which I think is probably still fairly accurate. Would you say that, Scott?
I mean, kind of as we were developing the options, we considered it, but it's one of those things that as soon as you change the boundaries, the projections are off, because the projections are based on the current boundaries for
Yeah.
the school. And so we kind of look for balance, knowing that we have that relatively low class size number calculated for capacity.
Yeah. Well, and some of the stress will be, with all these old schools, we have some, you can be in one school and just the different size of the different classrooms. I'm sure Honer's seeing a lot of different doors in different schools, and we have different sized classrooms, so we'll have to be mindful of, where we fill classrooms a little bit more. But some of the stress that we've been talking about is just the stress on like modifications we had to make this year at Edgar Road to add a 3rd lane to their driveway just to accommodate you know, the 430 children and their families that drive into the school every single day. So as those numbers come up, we'll have to pay special attention to the operations. We have children that are eating lunch between 10:30 and 1:30, you know, in a number of our schools. And so how do we support some of those? So I feel not as, I mean, the classroom will be one thing because it will take a little bit longer to get rid of the modulars in 3 of our schools. But our class sizes are pretty good regionally. And so the 2 to 3, while it'll be noticeable and felt here, it would be desirable in some places. But that's something our community from the onset has always said, this is a big deal to us. So we were very transparent about that last year, that this would, our overly generous phase-in process would lead to some interim bulge in our system. Yeah. Any more questions about this? You may have some as Scott starts talking about some of this data and information. Okay. Next up, cooperative strategies. And again, I wanted to just acknowledge or introduce Scott Leopold. Scott was involved in our project last year. He and Karen and one of the partners, Francine, have been on site doing a great job of working with our advisory. 2 members here today, Emerson Smith, EJ Brace, certainly Keita has been your board rep. And the group has been absolutely, in my estimation, although not participating outside the first meeting, just fantastic. Focusing on what's best for children, being mindful of families, being mindful of dynamics within our own community. And so, Scott?
Do we have a list somewhere, or can we,
Sure.
just recognize the people
Sure.
that have served on it?
Sure.
I probably should know who they are, but I don't.
Sure.
Want to make sure we show our appreciation for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Scott, you know how to use.
Yep, there we go. Okay, thank you again, John, thank you for the introduction. I'm Scott Leopold of Cooperative Strategies. I have the privilege of doing these types of processes all over the country. So redistricting is not something that I shy away from. It's sometimes a contentious issue, but I think it's important that we have a transparent process around it. And second, John, that it's been a great community to work with. They've asked the tough questions. They've really left no stone unturned when it comes to developing the options. So here's our overall process. We began with a plan for planning session in October to kind of lay out the entire process, start to establish the advisory committee, and we began to develop, or to go through the background data, so the capacity, the enrollment projection data from last year. We just got the enrollment projection data from this year, so we may have to make some adjustments. And then we began to meet with the advisory committee. And so we met with the advisory committee, I believe, 4 or 5 times to kind of develop some options from a preliminary standpoint. And then we took those options through a series of focus groups. We had, I believe, 16 or 15 different focus group sessions before the break, and then we had 2 after the break. And we engaged, I think, more than 125 different community members in these sessions. They gave us some great feedback to help refine those options, and that's what we're going to share with you today. And so those options that we're going to see today have been developed by the committee and us as consultants, and informed by that feedback from the focus groups. So once we get that feedback from the community, we'll come back as a committee, evaluate that feedback, and make final recommendations to the administration. So here's our overall process and timeline. We did sneak in some additional meetings here in January. We did meet on the 6th. We had, again, those focus groups up at Gibbons. And then the committee met for what felt like 3 or 4 additional hours. But it was a good meeting. It was very productive. And it was great that we were able to have those additional focus group sessions at Gibbons last week. So just some overall FAQs that we've had throughout this process. So why are we doing this? This process is kind of the next steps after the bond issue last year. And so we're converting Gibbons to a neighborhood school to serve kind of that North Webster area, and then relieve overall overcrowding that we saw illustrated in those enrollment projections, that utilization analysis early among all the other schools. So who's going to be impacted by this change? technically the answer is nobody, because of the very generous implementation plan that we have. So again, any student that's in the system next year in 2020-21 will have the choice to finish at that school all the way through. So who is the advisory committee? And so this is a group where we have representation from each of the elementary schools. We have I think 3 different appointees by the board here, and then of course Keita, who's been great on the committee, giving us kind of feedback as we've gone through.
And also preschool as well as all the other buildings too,
Yeah, absolutely.
actually.
A couple of, last I saw, we had EJ and Emerson are here. They were great on the committee as well. What are free introduced meals? I should put priced in there because it's not a reduced portion meal, it's a priced meal. So free introduced meals is a term that's defined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It is a indicator that we use for socioeconomic status. And so you'll see some information where we're kind of calculating what the free and reduced lunch percentage is or socioeconomic status at some of the schools in these options. We want to just be able to kind of get a barometer to see what the socioeconomic makeup of those potential boundaries could be. It's not necessarily the only indicator. I have another map that we can look at here, but it's what we're using for this process to compare the options to each other. Talked about the advisory committee. Again, this group is tasked with developing options, helping us interpret and process the community feedback, and making final recommendations to the administration and the board. It's not a decision-making body. They simply prepare that information and give it to you all so that you can make the final decision. Again, our focus groups, 15 sessions were held during the week of December 9th with more than 100 participants, and then we had those 2 additional focus groups at Givens on the 6th. Many of the committee members observed many of the focus group meetings, and that feedback was definitely considered as we refined and developed options. So now I'm just going to go through a little bit of background data. Some of these charts are going to look pretty familiar. So let's see if I can zoom in on this. I took my mouse away. There we go. So this is the live-in chart that we showed earlier. This is this exact same chart. So we're showing the capacity with no modulars, the live-in count, and now we have the free and reduced lunch percentage at each school. And so you can see our range here is from 7% to 13%, and then our utilization numbers, again, identical to what we had in the last slide. This shows what it looks like based on attendance, and so this accounts for students actually leaving their neighborhood school and going to Givens, students transferring in from out of the district. So you can see it does change a little bit. But everything that we're using for our options is based on that live-in percentage, but I wanted to show that attendance number just for comparison. I also want to show the current boundaries. And so these colors are going to be consistent throughout the presentation. John, I did use some brighter colors in the other.
Thank you.
But we have Hudson in this pink area here, Avery in the purple, Bristol in the green, Clark in the blue, and Edgar Road kind of in that round tan color. We have 3 detached zones, or sometimes called fingers. This area right here goes to Givens, this area to Edgar Road, and this area up here to Bristol. I'm sorry, Blue's Clark, I apologize. Blue's Clark, and then
Edgar.
Brown is Edgar, and then this is Bristol up here. Okay. Maybe. There we go. So this slide kind of helps us show what these boundaries are accomplishing. And so this map on the left shows us our overall current student density. And so you can see we have some pretty balanced concentration of student population throughout the district. But what's different is when we look at this map on the right, this shows us the students that are currently receiving free or reduced meals. And so you see we have a large concentration here right around Givens, and then we have some other pockets throughout the district as well. But what these what these detached or finger zones are doing is distributing some of this lower socioeconomic status area to all the other schools to give us that balance that we currently have. Again, to reiterate, our balance that we currently have is between, I think it was 9 and 13% or 7 and 13%. So it's within 5% of the district-wide average. I wanted to show some other maps to kind of show socioeconomic status. Again, that free and reduced lunch is just one indicator, and it's basically binary. It's either you're on, you receive free and reduced lunch, or you don't. It doesn't give you any other indicator of affluence above that. And so this map on the left shows us per capita income. And so this is just to kind of show you what this looks like overlaid on the boundaries. So you can see, you know, we have some areas where we have lower per capita income. We have some areas where we have much higher per capita income. You don't necessarily see that on the map with the free and reduced lunch because everything just kind of washes out. So I think it's important to consider kind of the differences in socioeconomics that we have aside from just that free and reduced lunch indicator. This is average disposable income. The question I got is, well, what is that? What does that mean? What this is this gives you basically what's left over after a household pays their taxes and cost of living expense. And so it's pretty similar to the per capita income. It's just a different way to look at it. But I just wanted to kind of throw this out here to kind of show you that free and reduced lunch isn't necessarily the only indicator to look at for socioeconomic status.
Questions?
Yes.
What are the sort of the light barriers? So zoom into one or
Sure.
of those. So how do you break down? So
Oh.
when I look at this, so you know the bottom right there, you got 73,000, and
Yeah.
then bottom left is 93. What's the line?
Those
there?
are U.S. Census block groups.
Okay, thank you.
So this is based on census data.
Okay, great.
I
Thanks.
had a footnote in there. I just didn't read it.
No, that's cool.
Sure.
Yeah, no, but it was more just I didn't understand how you were particularly divided.
Yeah,
divided up.
The black lines are the existing boundaries, and then
I
this
know
is
those
data
were, yeah.
that is by block group.
Okay, great, thank you.
One other exercise that we kind of wanted to run through is, you know, one of the questions that people inevitably ask in these processes is, why can't people just go to their geographically closest school? And so what we did is we plugged in the school locations into the GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, and we basically just told it to generate boundaries that would set every address to their closest school. And so this is what they would look like. And so, again, this is pure distance. It doesn't take into account any barriers like railroad tracks or busy roads. And so there's actually portions of currently, you know, students that are currently attending Hudson that are geographically closer using the road to Gibbons. And so this is like you're, you know, like we're alluding to, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go directly to school.
But based on sidewalk transportation?
This is based on the roads.
Roads.
This is just because that's what we
Not as
have.
the crow flies.
Not as the crow flies, but it's based on the, we're not catapulting kids from. But what this shows here is here would be our enrollment, and so we would have, you know, Avery at 121%, Bristol at 83% utilization, Clark at 101, Edgar Road at 100%, Hudson at 67%, and Gibbons at 61%. And then we have quite a disparity in that free and reduced lunch status. Gibbons would be at 39%, and all of the other schools would be under 10. And so this kind of prompted a couple other questions that we kind of discussed as a committee. Crossing hazardous intersections was pretty prevalent in the discussion, and there was a lot of discussion around Manchester. We had some preliminary options where we tried to keep all of the Hudson students north of Manchester, but just the way that the numbers worked out, I think that Hudson would be at about 63% if that were the case. And so it's just one of those realities of this is where our capacity is, and we're going to have to pull students from south of Manchester to Hudson if we want to utilize that capacity. But this was kind of a starting point that we started with the committee to kind of just get some conversation going to just kind of see how we can develop options. Okay, any other question on the background data before I go into the options? Okay, perfect. So again, the goal of this process is to establish a boundary for Gibbons Elementary and balancing utilization among all the other schools. Our guidelines that we kind of went back to throughout the process is to balance enrollment All of the options that we looked at did a pretty good job of keeping that balance. A couple are a little better than others. We wanted to attempt to balance socioeconomics and attempt to minimize distances traveled by students. One thing I do want to, go ahead.
When you talk about balancing enrollment, you're talking about balancing numbers to the capacity
Correct.
that is in the school.
That is correct.
So you're naturally going to have larger enrollment in an area.
Yeah, it's utilization.
Yes, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
One thing I do want to point out is just because of some of the demographic realities that our Webster Grove School District, there's some trade-offs. We're not necessarily going to be able to have fully balanced socioeconomics and minimize distances traveled by students. And so the options that I'm going to present kind of tackle these guidelines in different ways, because we're not going to be able to necessarily satisfy all of them at the same time in one option.
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
that? So as you've been talking with the committee and with community members, is that the order in which you want to consider the guidelines, or is there a preference between those three things?
They are not prioritized, but I will tell you that all of the options balance enrollment. It's just how they address that balance of socioeconomics versus the distance. And it's my understanding that there's no priority from the board on how we do that. So again, these options were developed by the committee, consultants, and were informed by focus group feedback. They are intended to generate feedback and conversations. There's no preferred option. The order in which you present them has no bearing. The community will not be asked to vote on an option for the board to adopt, and there are multiple opportunities for the community to provide feedback throughout this process. The committee will very likely make adjustments at their future meetings based on that community feedback. And so this is not set in stone. These 5 options can absolutely be massaged as the committee develops a recommendation.
And just to be clear on what you want from us today, it's just mainly to absorb
Yeah.
this information. We're not giving our opinions on what.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
We just want to make sure that you guys have kind of the first view at this, and we don't want a situation where you're at the grocery store and you have a community member that comes up and says, well, can you believe that they're proposing this? And we just want you to be informed.
It never happens.
So
Can you go back, sorry, can you go back a couple of slides? I apologize. So your guidelines, you say minimize distances traveled by students. Do the options also take into account that comment you made before about sort of the natural boundary line?
yes,
And so is that a 4th guideline, or is that embedded in number 3, or?
I think that if it's something that an option does, we'll call it out.
Okay, good, thank you very
Yeah.
much.
So again, I think it's very important to reiterate that all elementary students enrolled in school during the 2021 school year will be permitted to finish their entire career at that school. Okay, so I'm gonna spend a little bit more time going through scenario 1 just so you can get a sense of the format. And so this shows us the, let's see, more options. This shows us the proposed boundaries in the background colors. And so Gibbons is going to be in the yellow color, Bristol in the green, Clark in the blue, Edgar Road in that orange-brown color, Hudson in the pink or red, and Avery in the purple. So I'm going to go through these. I'm going to come back just so because your questions might be answered. So I'm going to show this slide that kind of gives an overview of every scenario, and then we're going to show then we're going to show a comparison that details specifically what areas move, and then we're going to show the data. So coming back to this, the intent of this scenario is to establish a boundary for Gibbons and balance utilization among all schools. This option focuses on minimizing distance. It doesn't do a whole lot to try to balance socioeconomics. It's mostly focused on distance. So the benefits of this, we had the fewest number of students traveling more than 1 mile. Our boundaries are contiguous, so we don't have any detached zones or finger areas. The Gibbons boundary encompasses the majority of the North Webster area. Really the only area that would be in one of those, that was in one of those current detached zones is this area right here that's currently at Clark. In this scenario, we have them going to Hudson.
I was gonna say, just to help them, would you just real quickly like draw some lines on like where Manchester,
Sure.
railroad tracks, Brentwood, and maybe like
So this
44.
is Manchester right here. And then Brentwood comes right through here, Kirkham. And then these are the railroad tracks right here. And
And do
the
44.
44 is down here.
And Elm is this dividing line, of course, our existing.
If it's possible, the next time you present this, if it's possible to go and highlight those, I think that would be very helpful.
So when we, in the survey, I have these slides and I also have a school locator on there, so you type your address in, and then I have full high resolution maps that you can look at.
It was very obvious then where,
Yeah.
okay, right, thank you.
Yeah. I wish that I could put it all on one map and make it legible.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it's
Alright.
possible to sort of just go and put, I mean, sort of a bright green.
Sure.
Or some other line, just for those major, just those obvious,
Yeah.
the roads and for the railroads.
can't-
just so we can-
You can't tell on this map, but they are a thicker line in there.
Okay,
Yeah. But yeah, we'll absolutely take that and we'll make sure we make that happen.
thank you.
Okay. So just some detail on the changes. And so our established boundary for Givens in this scenario is kind of outlined in this yellow line. And so I've overlaid these kind of outlines here on the current boundary so you can get a sense of what the areas currently attend to, or what schools the areas currently attend, and then, of course, what they would attend after. And so this yellow area would all be the new Givens boundary. We'd have this area coming in from Bristol. This area over here would come in from Avery. And so we'd have some students right here that would have to cross the other direction at Brentwood to go to Givens. This piece up here currently at Bristol would go to Givens. The Edgar Road piece would go to Givens. And this portion of the Clark piece would go to Givens. And then this piece over here would go to Hudson. And then we do have this area that's basically east of Rock Hill that's currently at Hudson would go to Givens. So this is the area that's right around the Givens site. And then we have this area over here, which is currently Edgar Road. It would go to Avery to kind of backfill the area that's coming out. And then this area that's currently at Clark, which is north of 44, would go to Bristol. This area here would stay at Clark, and I'm 99.9% sure that there's a pedestrian bridge that goes over 44. So they're still relatively walkable. And then this area right here would go from Edgar Road to Clark. And so again, this shows the final changes over here on this map with those existing boundaries overlaid. So here's our data associated with this option. And so I show the current information here for comparison. So you can see, again, those utilization numbers without portables. And then the current socioeconomic percentage. And then this shows us our, let's see if it'll let me do this. There we go. So this gives us our utilization here. Our range is pretty good. Avery 96%, Bristol 88, Clark 88, Edgar Road 91, Hudson 89, Givens 88. Looking at our free and reduced lunch, this is that balance that we were talking about that wasn't quite balanced. We have Givens at 34%, Avery at 6, Bristol less than 5, Clark 7%, Edgar Road less than 5, Hudson at 11. This table over here just kind of gives us our ins and outs. Just the number of students we'd have going, we'd have 49 students going from Clark to Bristol, 18 students going from Edgar Road to Clark, and this shows us how many students we would have coming into Givens from each school. This table down here I think is pretty interesting. This gives us the composition of the new boundaries based on the old. So in this scenario, our new boundary for Avery would be composed of 84% of the students would be from Avery, 16 would be from Edgar Road. Givens would be composed of 37% of students from Avery, 43 from Bristol, 4% from Clark, and again, that's that detached zone up there, 11% from Edgar Road, and 5% from Hudson. So this just kind of gives you a sense of what those schools are going to look like relative to the current boundaries. I've also done this quick metrics tab for each scenario to kind of just give you an idea of comparison and how they compare with each other. And I have a roll-up at the end that takes all of the scenarios and combines them. And so our current utilization balance is 80% to 127. In this scenario, we're 88 to 96, and that's good. Our current socioeconomic balance is 9% to 13%. In this scenario, it's 2 and 34%. And so again, we're getting our utilization good. We're not so, again, our balance on socioeconomics is much higher, and that spread is much higher than we currently have. But we have the fewest number of students who would have to travel more than a mile. And then we don't have any detached zones. And so that's just kind of a quick metric to kind of show how this looks. Okay, scenario 2. So the intent of this scenario, again, is to establish a boundary for givens and balance utilization among all the schools. This also tries to minimize distance, but also considers balancing socioeconomics a little bit more than option 1. And so in this scenario, we're using Brentwood and Kirkham kind of as that line. And so nobody would have to cross Brentwood at that very congested part up there that I drive down every time I come here. And so all of the area, in this North Webster area would be going to Givens, with the exception of this Clark piece that's over here, which would go to Hudson. The boundary for Givens would basically, on the southern portion, line up with Kirkham right here, and then Rock Hill would jump down and follow the railroad tracks. And it would even go south of the railroad tracks down here to pick up this piece of Clark. And then we have this area over here that would go from Edgar Road to Bristol and also Avery to Bristol. This is the second fewest number of students traveling more than 1 mile. We still have contiguous attendance boundaries. It eliminates the needs for students to cross Brentwood. Givens encompasses, again, the majority of that North Webster area. We do better with the socioeconomic spread, but it's still kind of the second largest disparity between the highest and lowest school. The range in this one is 4% to 29%. So here's our detail map, just to show you kind of the areas. I'm not sure how I feel about displaying on a touch screen. Just to kind of give you the ins and outs. And so again, this area, Avery to Bristol, Edgar Road to Bristol. This area goes from Clark to Bristol. And then all of this would go in Givens. So here's our data. So utilization, again, pretty balanced. 87 Avery, 88 at Bristol, 89 at Clark, 96 at Edgar Road, 89 at Hudson, 93 at Givens. Our balance a little bit better, but we still have some of those schools that are under that 5%. And we're 29% at Givens, so we're under that. We were 34% in option 1. Remember, the closest school was 39%. So here's our ins and outs. 34 students going from Avery to Bristol, 71 from Avery to Givens. Bristol to Givens, 214 students. The composition, looking at this, so Avery would essentially stay all the students that would be at Avery at the end are at Avery now. Looking at Givens would be 18%. Avery, 56% of students from Bristol. 11% from Clark, 10% from Edgar Road, 4% from Hudson. Okay, so that's scenario 2. Okay, scenario 3. This is similar to 2 in a lot of ways, but we try to get the socioeconomic balance better. But our trade-off in this one is that we're having some longer distances that students may have to travel. This is the best balance in socioeconomics among all the options. We have a moderate number of students traveling more than 1 mile, and we do have 2 detached attendance zones in this particular option. And we do continue to split that North Webster area, although not to the extent that it is currently split. So looking at this, so again, we'd have this area at the railroad tracks here coming up into Givens from Bristol and Clark. We would pull this area out of Avery and into Givens. What's different about this one is the area that's in Givens that is currently going to Edgar Road, and this scenario would go to Bristol, which we think is close. Well, we know it's closer than Edgar Road. I think they still may be walkable depending on the hazards. And then we have these areas over here coming in from Avery, and this area over here coming in from Edgar Road. And then we have this area right here around Hickson going from Edgar Road to Clark. So looking at the numbers for this one, so Avery 92%, Bristol 92%, Clark 92%, Edgar Road 88, Hudson 89, Givens 88. Looking at our socioeconomic balance, we're 14% at Avery, which I believe is what it is today. Bristol's 9%, Clark 6%, Edgar Road 8%, Hudson 11%, and Givens 13%. I think one of the important factors to consider, kind of as we're going through this process, is again based on that, that distribution of those low socioeconomic students we have now. It's really not going to be possible to have full balance among all the schools unless we're pulling students out of that North Webster area like we are now. And so this scenario does that, but to a lesser extent than it is currently happening. And so looking at our distribution, composition, Bristol 68% would stay Bristol, 12% from Clark, 20% from Edgar Road. Looking at Givens, 23% from Avery, 60% from Bristol, 12% from Clark, and 5% from Hudson. We don't have any Edgar Road because that piece was moved to Bristol in this scenario. And if we look at our metrics here, we've got good utilization balance, we've got good socioeconomic balance, kind of a moderate number of students outside of a mile, but we do have those 2 detached zones that we currently have. And those are, again, this area which currently goes to Edgar Road, which would go to Bristol, and then this area over here, which currently goes to Edgar Road, would stay at Edgar Road, but it would now be detached because of this area right here going to Bristol. Okay, scenario 4. So the intent of, again, we're establishing that boundary, balancing the utilization. This option also moderately balances the socioeconomics to the point where there's some trade-off in distances, but everything is still contiguous in this option. And so this is the second best for socioeconomics among all the options, and it's contiguous, but it does have the largest number of students that are traveling more than a mile. A portion of the Webster Groves area will continue to attend at Avery. So again, this is kind of this area that's between Bell and Brentwood. This area would split between Avery and Givens in this scenario. Just some detail on our change areas. So we'd have this area coming in to Avery, or from Avery to Gibbons, this area to Gibbons from Bristol. This area in here, kind of, you know, between Rock Hill and Elm would stay at Bristol. And then all of this area would go from Bristol to Gibbons. We'd have this piece over here moving from Edgar Road to Bristol. Looking at the data. So 87%, 85, 89, 93 at Edgar, 93 at Hudson. Gibbons is a little high at 97. Looking at our socioeconomic status here, Avery 12%, Bristol 4, Clark 6, Edgar Road 8, Hudson 10, Gibbons 19. Looking at our distribution. So in this scenario, Gibbons would be roughly 50% students from Bristol, 27 from Avery, 11 from Clark, 10 from Edgar Road, 2% from Hudson. Looking at those metrics again. Again, we had that, you know, our utilization is a little high at Gibbons. Had to be in order to get that socioeconomic balance down. Our socioeconomic spread is 6 to 19%, but we have 604 students that are outside of a mile, but we're completely contiguous. We don't have any detached zones. Okay. Scenario 5, this is the conversation starter. Okay. The intent for this scenario was to establish a boundary for Gibbons that essentially is that North Webster area, and then basically pulling in areas that are detached from all of the other schools. So this is kind of the opposite of what the current boundaries are currently doing. So the benefits of this are that the Gibbons boundary encompasses the majority of the North Webster area. It minimizes the number of families that are impacted. I know that's not a criteria, but I think it's kind of noteworthy in this situation. It doesn't impact a lot of students because the only moves that are really happening are directly from a school to Gibbons. There's not like a domino effect where we have to move students in and then backfill them from another school. We do go from 3 detached zones to 6. And so we've got, again, kind of that zone right around Gibbons, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 detached zones. And we still have that Edgar Road piece over here that would be detached. And we have a moderate number of students that are traveling more than a mile, but in some cases, we are pulling kids from areas that are somewhat walkable to their existing schools to Gibbons. The socioeconomic spread in this one is 5% to 26%. It's a little bit, you know, it's higher than some of the other ones. It's kind of in the middle. But again, what that intent was to establish that zone for that North Webster area that it's, again, relatively walkable to Gibbons, and then bringing in those other areas. So this shows you the changes. Again, all of the changes are to Gibbons, with the exception of this little piece where we go from Clark to Hudson. And so, again, just these detached zones coming into Gibbons. Oh no, I did it. Okay, so looking at our data. So Avery 92%, Bristol 89, Clark 86, Edgar Road 88, Hudson 83%, Gibbons we're at 98. And so our spread here is 5% to 26. Looking at our composition, I think that this is noteworthy because Avery would be 100% Avery students, Bristol, all the students that would be there are already there. Same with Clark, same with Edgar Road. We have that one little piece from Hudson, or from Clark to Hudson. But the Gibbons would be relatively, with the exception of Hudson, relatively balanced as far as its composition from all the other schools. Again, our utilization, 83 to 98%, socioeconomic balance, 5% to 26. Students outside of a mile, moderate, compared to the other ones, 556, detached zone 6. And so this was just kind of an exercise to show, can we establish a zone for that North Webster area, pull other areas in, and get that socioeconomic indicator kind of balanced? And the short answer is no, you really can't do it without moving an area out like we did in option 3. But this is to kind of just show what that would look like if we did something that was kind of opposite what we're doing now with those detached zones. So this just kind of outlines all of the scenarios on one slide. We've got the quick metrics down here, all next to each other, to kind of get a handle on what they do. I think that the big takeaway here is that there is no perfect scenario. It's going to have to be some kind of balance or trade-off, just because of some of the realities that we have to deal with. Again, these are not intended as final options. This is purely to generate conversation and feedback, and the committee will very likely make adjustments to some or more of these based on that feedback as they kind of move forward to develop a recommendation. So collecting feedback and next steps. We have an address locator which is currently online, so you can essentially plug in your address and it will tell you which school you would be zoned to in all 5 scenarios. We have an online survey that is also available. All of the materials are linked in the survey, and I have the slides embedded in the survey as well, so as you're going through the survey, you'll have all the slides right there in front of you. Our community meetings are scheduled for the week of the 27th. The survey will be active through February 9th. The advisory committee will review that feedback as recommendations are developed. Final board presentation is scheduled for February 24th. So any clarifying questions?
So just back to Alex's point from earlier. So the numbers in terms of the students are based on where children are today.
Correct.
And then is it possible to go and look at sort of projections at that peak year and to say this is what it would look like if those peaks, and clearly we don't know exactly how it's going to come out, but this is what it would look like if those peaks happened to come where they're projected?
I think that once we kind of get that feedback, we can take a closer, deeper dive into the projections, and as we're developing recommendations, have that be more of a consideration.
Okay.
To see, if we have a school that is projected to grow much faster than the other ones, maybe we look at some adjustments or tweaks to accommodate that so we don't have to come back to this table again.
Yeah, I think it's probably just a case of making sure you've got enough sort of capacity and the slack you're building into the system. If you believe that, let's say, the Avery area is going to grow, it tends to be where younger families tend to sort of move in, which is certainly one of the points where they do. Perhaps as an objective is to build a little bit more slack into that. Perhaps you have to in some of the more, in some other neighborhoods where perhaps you get less young families moving in.
Right.
So, good, well, we're interested to see.
Excellent.
So you mean strive for a lower utilization percentage in areas where we know families are more? Okay.
Absolutely.
I had the
Yeah. So
exact same question.
Yeah, I think it makes it. Just a comment, by the way. I think this is excellent. I mean, at least for me, I thought just the way it lays out, the way you've got the various things moving on, the various different metrics you've put out there. For me, at least, it's there's some very eye-opening things. I'm also glad that in terms of as you look at socioeconomics, you've gone beyond just free and reduced lunch, and you're looking at sort of some of the deeper factors there. Because I think at times we get,
we get fixated on it.
Yeah, you've got this binary, but the reality is that the poverty extends beyond just that bright line.
Right.
And so I think that's very important for us to understand what's going on there. So thank you, and also thank you to the committee for your work so far, and I know there'll be more work you're going to have to do.
I have a question, a couple questions, and I know I want to echo that thank you to everybody who was part of the committee, Keita and others, as well as you. And this might be a question for you, John. When we consider school funding, I remember, is it like Title I or Title II for lower socioeconomic?
Title
10 to 1. So how is that calculated? Is it like percentage per school? Is it district?
We do not have enough children who receive free and reduced lunch to have a comprehensive
As a
Title I
district
school.
or any one of our schools?
Any one of our schools, to be a comprehensive school. We get
Do you know
targeted
what
funds.
percentage that needs to be?
It's 40.
Okay.
It's 40%.
So we didn't see anything coming close.
No, I mean, some of them are close.
Close.
And again, our SES numbers, we can't project. So while
Right.
we can look at the resident enrollment or the projections and get distance to school or utilization, that's something that we won't be able to project. We do get funds, so we do have schools that are targeted schools based on their number, and they do get funds, and it's a per pupil allocation based on the number of kids. So the school in all these scenarios, maybe all the scenarios, I think maybe one Gibbons wasn't the highest, they would get the money would follow the children. We've also spoken just about, depending on what scenario is selected, just how do we, from a budgetary standpoint with our own district monies, provide
Fund them
equitable funding
Yeah.
for them.
So my other question is, and I don't know if it can be answered this morning, but as we consider these options, do we know what constitutes success for lower socioeconomic status learners, for low SES learners? Is it the money that's given, and is it lower class sizes, which would be related to this? Do you know anything?
Can I jump on? So I have, it's like similar to this. So that question, is it more challenging or does it worry you more to see a spread of 2 to 34 or something more where everything's average from a socioeconomic standpoint to tackle? Like
In terms
what is
of
the
what,
most-
you mean
What is
educational
the most
outcomes?
equitable outcome for student success?
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that, it's kind of multifaceted, and Chris, you can jump in at some point if you like. I would say that, again, from a regional standpoint, while the discrepancy in Webster is pretty big, and I think there are some things just based on the history of our school system that could contribute to negative perceptions. Regionally, the number 30% of students on free and reduced lunch isn't overly significant. I mean, it's not really big. Again, locally it is. But I think from a resource standpoint, I think, I think class sizes matter. But I've read a lot, especially last year when we were looking at options. Neighborhood schools are a big thing where children are, again, proximity to the school so that the barrier of, parents or kids getting to the school for extracurriculars or just getting to school on time is removed, where learning can be, like for all kids, whether you're on free or reduced lunch, contextualized to your environment. Certainly with what we know about supporting children in their learning, it's got to be a wraparound approach, and children that are on free and reduced lunch, the level of, if there's any kind of support, housing support, if there's medical support, like all social emotional learning, all of our kids in our trauma doesn't just follow, it isn't just a socioeconomic status thing, it's all of our kids regardless of that. However, data would support the children that are moving over and over again or having different things. So I don't think there's a single factor, so to speak, but I do, coming back to what you asked earlier, one of the things that when we were going through the Prop E work, we talked about a neighborhood school for this community. And we didn't talk about diversifying schools for this community. And I remember talking with Emerson a long time, and his words were, it's good for black children to go to school with white kids, and it's good for white kids to go to school with black kids. And regardless of your race, people want that, and because of, like Scott said at the beginning, the way our housing is within this community, we don't have that opportunity unless we create the zones. So It's a good question, Christine. I know I'm not answering it directly of a single
No,
factor.
it's not a single factor, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say when we had the focus groups, there was, I mean, Emerson, you can feel free to jump in, but they were.
Thank you.
I mean, they were split. I mean, there were some parents that felt that diversity was more important, and there were some parents that felt that proximity, being able to walk your students to school is more important. Like, there wasn't a definitive right or wrong. So we really wish that it would have been more simple, but.
Yeah.
And don't think because of the socioeconomic number is high, that don't mean that they're not achievers.
Oh, of course.
That means that their socioeconomic is low, family don't make as much money. That don't mean that they're not achieving. But look at those numbers as, we use those numbers, as bottom line, as diversity. That's why we have the condition we have now, moving Northwestern out into the other areas to balance our diversity. So now we've made the decision to get the neighborhood school. So our process of thinking has to change.
And I would just encourage you to think about that, those census maps we looked at earlier, because we're showing the free and reduced lunch status, but that's not the only indicator. And so just kind of consider that and have that in the back of your mind as you're trying to process.
I was going to say that. I was going to say it's going to be my last statement. You know, I went to maybe a half a dozen or so, maybe, I don't know, for the focus groups. And the focus group, the high school kids were in, for me, was the most informative. They got, you know, as far as why not take, this is their words, not ours, why not take the kids out of these areas and send them up to Gibbons? Instead of taking the socioeconomic pride and sending them somewhere where people in these other areas probably got 2, 3 automobiles, have the ability to provide the transportation, you know, and then that would kind of balance the ability for kids in the Gibbons area to participate in after-school activities. Because now if they do, they have to worry about how they're going to get home. So that was the high schoolers that came up on their own. So I thought that was fairly fantastic that they saw. Yeah.
One thing that came out that kind of stuck with me, a couple of parents were saying that connectivity to the school is important. There was an African-American parent that said that his kid was the only African-American in his class. And the kid was in 2nd grade, so kids are kids, they just like to play, but he could kind of tell that it wasn't a comfortable situation. And so, like Scott said, it was kind of 50-50. Some people like walkability. They like the fact that there might be more connectivity in the school, and then others were like, oh, I kind of like the university. DJ mentioned, I always say this, but he mentioned if one of the scenarios passed where there would be a higher SES in one of the schools, would that then create opportunities for intros, whichever one it is, district activities? Like, could there be like more things like the singers? Could there be like a elementary sports league? I don't know what all that would entail. Would there be other opportunities for kids from the schools to then interact with each other so that there still could be diversity, or whether they can still, because then otherwise you kind of create a situation. If you're at Bristol and there's only 2%, and then you go to Hicks and all of a sudden there's some things you have to kind of consider.
Don't get all the opportunities that you think of. You know, Gibbons can be a STEAM, STEM, whatever all the acronyms are, something special, you know. And there are parents, I know, that say, well, I want my child to have that opportunity to go to that type of educational environment. So you might have some Webster parents volunteer to send their child there. So we want to discount that as well.
Quick question on scenario 1 and 2, is the difference between those two, that scenario 2 kind of takes a little bit more consideration into the major roads?
Yes.
Okay. Because they're both more targeted on least distance travel, but scenario 2 is just then taking into consideration like Brentwood.
Yeah. Scenario 2 doesn't cross Brentwood, and scenario
Okay.
1 does.
Okay. Thank you.
And also the kids from moving from Edgar Road to Clark would also have to cross Elm. Too. And
Say that
one-
again, John.
And one, the kids down here would have to, or now at Edgar Road, would have to cross Elm.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Oh, there was one other thing. When I, is that link live yet?
It should be.
When I tried clicking on it, it went to like a file 404 error.
Which one?
The top one.
There's a typo on the City Webster Groves.
Oh.
Is it on the web
Okay.
page? Where do we
We're
find
gonna
that?
blast. We're fine tune. Steve or
Yeah.
Scott, does that make sense? What you
Yeah.
saying?
I don't know
We're
why.
fine tuning the survey. We're looking to blast the survey out by Monday at the latest, maybe today. But we're just getting some of the language down. We'll blast it out to the families. We'll put it on social media. There's gonna be an ad in the Webster Kirkwood Times this coming Friday. The open house events, and I still gotta I'll put them on your calendar. I've communicated the days with you, are the 28th and 29th of January. We're gonna have morning, noon, and night. If you can come to any of them, it's kind of like last time around where we have it, we're gonna have it at the service center. Anybody can come in, they could see these on big boards, see the data, talk, and, we just largely listen to what they have to say. And that along with the survey data, which will be the survey data, just like last time we told people, we're gonna be fully transparent. We're gonna post it online so everybody can see what everybody has to say about the options. If there's any, last time it was completely unfiltered, but if there's any ugliness, like ugly language, other than just curse words, maybe we might take those off or do something with them.
You said that was January 28th and 29th.
20th and 29th, I'll send you the invites. I meant to do that following our board plan meeting and I forgot.
Yeah, it's just a typo.
Can that be changed on this slide?
Yeah, I'll change it on the slide. Before we post it.
So Scott, you just want to put up, just go, you could do mine right now, 658 West Lockwood, just to show people what it's gonna look like when people go to it.
658. Which magazine should I subscribe to?
Anyone that I don't have to pay for. I haven't had a magazine subscription in a long.
What's the magazine?
What's your zip?
63119.
63. Is that everybody's zip?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
No.
Whatever.
All right, yes, true, yes, okay, sorry, yes.
122.
So it says, I got a pop-up on here. The attendance boundaries displayed are proposed for the fall. I gotta update that.
Yeah,
Should be
21,
21,
22.
22.
Please.
So it pops it up here.
Oh, then on the right's where I can see all the different options where I would.
Yep. So option 1 Bristol, or current Bristol, option 1 Bristol, option 2 Gibbons, option 3 Gibbons.
I probably wouldn't use the word proposed either. I might use the word possibilities,
Okay.
based on sort of where something comes out. Because if you start saying proposed, I think there's give the impression something's already been decided.
Once we get the link updated, once we get the survey updated, we'll also post all of this online. Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
I will say, and it's probably obvious, one of the biggest concerns of parents with siblings and this whole, I know we're given already a generous grandfathering and that kind of thing, but siblings was the biggest concern.
Yeah.
I don't know how we would.
And that's one of the things that we've been exploring already, and then ultimately we'll have to come to you, by that February 24th, which is our recommendation of what to do. I think the struggle is going to be kind of what I've communicated to parents at all my open houses. If, take a Bristol, for example, I mean, we've got plenty of full schools. They're currently at 470 enrollment. Their projections are to increase by 490 in 22, 23. If all of them stayed, again, let's just say that all the grade levels were the same, and then we allowed their siblings to stay, and then we brought in Clark, in one scenario it has 100 kids entering Bristol. Just 25 of them came, and then their siblings behind them came. You're quickly at a school of well over 500, with not really good space for a modular. But we want to see what the options are, so we're going to bring that, especially with the final recommendation, what we're thinking. So, again, we feel it's overly generous. We know it's going to be disruption. That's what I told people last year because they weren't wanting a promise from me. And so I just told them, I can't promise you that. I realize you might not vote yes for this, but we just have to relieve space. So,
Band-Aids.
but thank you. That was prominent.
John, do we have numbers of siblings so that as you're doing that, will you be able to give a fairly accurate assessment as to what the potential is or not?
Not unless they're in our preschool system. Scott just kind of estimated. He gave an estimate. What did you think, Scott? Didn't you say 40%? What was your number? How did you come up?
I did math. It was.
Oh dear, don't do that.
It was basically 50% of the kindergartners coming in any given year have an older sibling in the next.
Also in elementary.
Yeah, also in elementary in the next 5 grades.
The issue is obviously it's the ones who are younger, not the ones who are
Right.
older.
Right. So, depending on how many students are impacted in a scenario has an impact of how many
Yeah.
siblings are possible.
Yeah. And with siblings being, like in our scenario, Luke starts next year, he's zoned for Bristol. Well, Charlotte's going to be like 4 years away or something like that. So it's just, it'd be a long time to get to that space relief, and you hate to disrupt families, but it's a pretty generous phase-in process too, compared to school districts locally as well as around the country.
And you'll know that when you choose to send Luke to Bristol, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
So you could choose to
Right, absolutely.
start him wherever.
I mean, the standard is rising 5th graders, and that's it. That's pretty much what most districts do.
And there were some comments from the focus groups, just cut it off now. Do
Yeah.
the wrong thing.
Yeah. Because the
Yeah.
space, because we have kids that are in crazy weather like this, going from modulars inside and out, and depending on the number of services they have, and
Lake
Edinburgh
Road.
right, crazy, ridiculous. 6 hour, 10:30 to 1:30 lunches, like we said, and then traffic situations. Again, it's so.
Transportation was another big question.
Yeah.
Depending on the scenarios, are there discussions of more transportation
Yeah.
after school? Just-
We are currently exploring possibilities related to that with transportation. So some of the folks in this room and I are seeing if there's something that we can do to support that. Thank you, Scott.
All right.
I think you can make your 11:55.
Yeah.
You might hydroplane, but be careful.
It's raining, people can't drive. So.
I do appreciate you coming in.
No,
Yeah, thank you so
Why
much.
not?
Great job.
It's great to be here. It's been a great process. I've learned a lot. The committee's been great. So, again, I'm excited.
Yeah. We'll see you again.
Yeah.
Have a
Thank
safe
you.
trip.
Thank you.
Break for a second, or should we go?
Anybody need a break? Hearing none,
I'm
I
hearing
say
none
we
too.
continue.
Okay.
I'm just gonna eat some more eggs.
Next up, Ms. Frazier, do you want to introduce
Good morning. So we have representatives with us this morning from our teams that are working on our propositioning projects. So DHA is working, as you know, on the Hickson addition. So Don Hussman is here with them to present on that project. And then the Honer Associates architect team is working on the safety, security, and accessibility projects, and they'll be presenting on them. As you can see, we have lots of boards around the room, so the presentations have been blown up and put on those boards if you want to take a look at them after the meeting. Those boards then at one point will be in the schools at the location, so people can come in and see what is going to be done to their entrance and things like that. Also, Mr. Rob Stuber is here, so he's here to answer any questions. He's been working very hard on all these projects. And I also, before they started, wanted to go over, at your seat, you have a copy of the timeline for the bidding schedule. So we're going to start by advertising, of course, in the newspapers for these projects. The Hickson project will be the week of February 10th, and then the week of February 17th, because you have to advertise that for 2 weeks. And then the safety, security, and accessibility projects will be the the preceding weeks, February 3rd and February 10th. Plans will be available to the contractors on February 27th for the Hickson project, February 20th for the safety, security, and accessibility projects. And then we'll have the bids due to us on April 2nd for Hickson, and then March 26th for the other projects. And then probably most important, the recommendation to the Board of Education will be at the meeting on April 13th for both projects. Okay, and if there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead
Just one.
and...
Sorry.
Yes.
So in addition to the ads, do you also proactively reach out to the people you would expect to bid on this, just to make sure? I mean, I'm sure they are scanning this and seeing this, but do you...
Yeah, the architects will do that, and Rob does that too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I usually contact a half a dozen contractors, familiar contractors. I know the architects both have lists, and next coming weeks, we're going to kind of develop a target list to send heads up to.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll turn it over to Mr. Don Hussman.
Good morning.
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 We're going to see a presentation that probably most of you have seen the early stages of it. I believe we last met in September. So I'm going to move directly into the site plan. Okay. Oh, am I hitting the wrong?
Try the space bar, Don.
Space bar. Now, here we go. Maybe it's just a little slow. Well, the last time we got together, I think we defined that Hickson will obviously be absorbing the 6th grade. And in order to do that, we're going to see a pretty substantial population growth at that school. The areas shown in yellow or gold are new additions. Currently, Hickson, the size of the building is about 113,000 square feet. And in this particular graphic, we're showing it in its full grown state. And that building will grow to about 175,000 square feet. Now, that's a pretty substantial growth, but it equates to a square footage per student after that growth, assuming that you have 1,000 or more students at that school. It equates to a square footage per student of about 175 square feet per student, and that's in kind of rough math terms. I kind of wanted to bring that to your attention, and it's important because as we look at national averages for space in middle schools, we see that hovering right at about 174 to 175 square feet per student. So it's kind of interesting because we didn't look at that when we were proposing the additions. It was more based on the fact of spaces needed. So it looks like we're falling right within the norms of schools that really are in the United States of about that square foot allocation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the site improvements first. I think that our pointer here will project on, yeah, it does. You're going to notice a couple of maybe significant changes with regard to site conditions. This is one of the modifications to the site to where the parking is actually going to be split a little bit now by a green area that will act as a bioretention area, which is important. I won't go into the detail of that. But the important thing is that has been developed so that we can get a better drop-off zone for students arriving by car. And we have actually bowed that driveway out just a little bit so that we have a safe zone for students exiting from their cars. If you have students at Hickson now, or if you've had them in the past, you know that it's a little complicated over there during arrival and departure. So we really made a substantial effort to improve that. I will talk about the significance of the entry change in a moment, but let me first finish some of the site issues and improvements. This document is a little bit old from the standpoint that our loop for the bus route is certainly in accurately shown, but we've now eased this curve a little bit to allow a little bit better expansion to the cafeteria. We'll talk about that in a moment. But parking is going to be expanded according to the principal. She gave us her estimation of the population shift that we'll have with teachers and support staff coming over. So right now, Hickson currently has additional parking spaces that are not being filled on a daily basis, but we have a pretty substantial amount of parking if we look at all of the parking available, and especially if we count parking on the opposite side of Moss Field, which is a pretty good hike to get back up to the building. But parking is improved on the site, and we actually are working within the code recommendations, the zoning code recommendations for schools, and Rob and I have been working with the city of Webster Groves on that particular component. Also on this site, I don't want you to be misled by the number of trees that are shown. Actually, there are outside of our boundary along the approach line. This is a pretty heavily planted area, as well as some areas are. Now, the city also has requirements for planting, but we need to be sensitive to that, the quantity of trees that will be displaced or replaced. And we're currently working with the city to balance that, but we know that we have to be sensitive from the standpoint of placement of landscape due to safety and security issues too. So that's something that is currently ongoing. We have a landscape architect that works directly with our civil engineer on that, and again, we will be in conformance to the zoning requirements for the city of Webster Groves. I'm going to talk a little bit about the change, and I know that we discussed this probably pretty heavily at my last presentation, but if you remember back when Hickson was built in the 1955 era, Interstate 44 wasn't there, and the front of the school certainly was recognized as the north side. It has been the front ever since the original building was constructed, but oftentimes for people either moving into the district or maybe not being familiar with the building itself, it's a little confusing when you approach the building on site. Where do I go in? So that's going to be changed with the new additions. The addition to the most west is about an 18,000 square foot, two-story addition, and it will accommodate the new entry point into the school. And the slide that we see after this will show a rendered perspective of that entry point. It doesn't mean that we are neglecting the north entry point. We still will maintain it. As a matter of fact, we'll be constructing a new entry canopy at that point going into the building so that it is accessible from students arriving by bus. And it's kind of hard to see, but we're indicating some buses out in that zone. The real significant factor for those site improvements, though, really has to do with site and vehicular circulation. Students still will have multiple access points to go into the building at this point, as well as this point adjacent to the cafeteria. There are other, as we said, there are 4 major additions to the building. The addition to the south really encompasses an academic building, 2-story, and then we incorporate. We spoke quite a bit last time about the significance of this building having a storm shelter gymnasium. I believe that will be the only shelter that you have in any of your buildings. But significantly, in 2015, the building code was modified, and it indicated that any structures that are being constructed as a new building or that has significant additions will, by code, be required to incorporate a storm shelter that the size of that shelter must be sized such that it can accommodate the entire occupancy of the building in a storm occurrence. And that means all students, all teachers, all staff, all visitors, and that has been sized accordingly. That's a significant item within a change in the building code. That code will now be enforced all throughout St. Louis County effective April of this year, but because your school district was visionary enough, even though the current Webster code does not require that, we do anticipate that Webster will adopt the 2015 building code within this year. So I think it was a good visionary move and a really solid thing that acts and supplements the safety and security of students. The other 2 additions onto the school are a little bit smaller. This one, I'm sorry, I didn't mention, this is a 46,000 square foot, and I'm talking in round numbers here, 46,000, 2-story academic addition, single-story tall gymnasium. We are relocating the girls' locker room, which currently sits here, will now be over here, and it will have better access into the physical education areas. The other additions, this one is a music addition. We'll see those in a little bit more detail as we look at the floor plans. But the music addition will add a new band room, and it will add a new choral room. And those existing areas within the school will then be repurposed for other academic functions. The last addition, or at least on this diagram that we're going to speak about, is the expansion of the cafeteria, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail when we look at the floor plans. I believe that you had seen this. We have been working on the evolution of the building exterior. It has not changed in a great deal, but this will be the new main entrance, and this particular rendering is as though you were standing on Elm looking back into the entry. This is where the current library sits now. Now this addition is quite a bit larger than that, but it really doesn't take very much more space to the west. It does take a little bit more space, ground space, to the north and to the south.
Tree backdrop does look nicer than 44.
It does. It does. And those large 2 trees in the foreground, I must admit, our artist put those in, and he said, well, they framed the building so nicely. And he said, maybe someday they'll grow up to be that size. This is that same addition. This is the 18,000 square foot addition. This is if we were standing again on Elm, but now we're directing our view back toward the building, and we're looking at the opposite corner. This is looking at the new library that will be constructed for the building. This, quite frankly, will be a significant add to that building. It is, in height, it's a 1.5-story reading room. I think I had mentioned that the last time it's probably very similar to some of the new modifications that you're seeing being made through the St. Louis County libraries, to where we have a lot more volume in those spaces. The significance of this is the predominant wall that is facing us here is facing north. And north light provides wonderful light into libraries, and well, it's the preferred light anytime you have a museum, gallery, library, something like that, because it's diffused light. And the interesting thing is, if we take advantage of that light, we can actually reduce our energy costs through artificial illumination in those type of spaces. So it is significant. And that, again, will be, we see sort of the two-story portion behind that. This is the library area. Actually, it goes all the way over to this part here. And this is the two-story area. There are classrooms on the second floor, as well as administrative. Now we're going to look at those floor plans. So this describes in a little bit more detail, and it's probably easier for you to see, or if you can track along on your drawings that are in front of you. But that new addition coming in right here will be the new main entrance. That will be actually a two-story entrance. It's not overly large, but the significance of that entrance is it will provide substantial safety and security measures. That is a double-doored vestibule. It will have the security system within that vestibule for a visitor to come in and I'm not sure what the right term is, to where you put your identification into the Raptor system, and then you are allowed through a doorway to come then into the main office. You're held in that office until either your business is finished or you're directed to somewhere else into the building. The area that is in sort of that lime green zone right here is the relocated administrative area that's coming out of the current area, which is right here. So that's sort of a shift. They're moving into the new portion of the building. Again, that's a reception area. There's the SRO's office, who will have immediate access out to that reception area. And then right behind his office, or that office, is the principal's office. There's a small conference area within there, and then the assistant principals are located right in this zone. Now, the assistant principals, and it's hard to tell from this document, but they're going to be actually in a renovated portion of the existing building. But as we look at that entire suite, we'll never be able to tell the difference between what is renovated and what's new. One thing that I should point out that's really significant for this building is the location right here where my cursor is of a new elevator. And that elevator will be nothing like the elevator that's currently in the building. It will be a full-size passenger elevator that would allow anyone who's physically disabled access up to the second floor. Certainly will aid in the logistics of cleaning and other things, and in case there's someone on the second floor that would become injured or impaired, that elevator is sized such that a full-size stretcher can access or be accessed and accommodate any areas on that second floor. The area in purple is that library media that we've been talking about. It is significantly larger than your current library. It's kind of falling into the MSIP standards of, we base library sizes on a population within a school, and much to many's disbelief, libraries are not getting smaller, they're actually getting bigger. There are a lot more activities within the libraries, and they truly do become the heart of the school. This will become a very substantial library where we've been working with both the principal and the librarian and about the flexibility and just the learning centers within the space. There will be a dedicated, I hate to use the word classroom, I'll call it more of an instructional area for library instruction and such. And the library, again, will have, it will feel very different than your current library. It will be much more open and much more user-friendly. I'm going to take us down the corridor system here. We're going to pass this area here, and again in lime green. That is where the current nurse's office is, and that will be expanded and completely renovated. Now, as we continue past that area, we're going to go in front of the gymnasium. This is where the former girls' locker room, well, it's where it currently is, and we are going to demolish that and relocate it over to this area where my cursor is right now. The primary reason for that is so that we can have sort of a inverted horseshoe circulation space into the new two-story academic wing. We've spoken about the academic wing before. It has both levels are identical floor plans, first level and second level. So we'll talk a little bit about those. They are structured such that there are 2 science classrooms, and they're kind of back to back. They share a common science prep room, and those classrooms are substantially larger than any classroom that is currently exist in the building. It focuses primarily on the best recommendations for science instruction. They are combination lab lecture areas, and those classrooms exceed 1,500 square feet each. They are structured such that they're surrounded by 3 adjacent classrooms, so that, and I'll just focus on this group right here, that becomes the team then. Those 3 classrooms, math, language, arts, and social studies, along with science, makes up essentially a team. And then that is repeated on the opposite side. Again, it's almost a mirror image, symmetrical around a center point here. So there's that cluster. Also on each floor, and Hickson currently kind of suffers from the lack of appropriate toilet rooms for students. So we expanded this is the current footprint of restrooms. You can see these are substantially larger, and they will be stacked for economy. So again, those restrooms will be repeated on the second floor. As we go down the corridor, we're now looking at the main floor of the multi-purpose storm shelter. Access is from this corridor into that space. There are multiple points out. This point actually goes out into, we didn't talk about it when we looked at the site plan, but the new hard surface playground will be right here. It's kind of similar in relation to what you currently have, but because the academic wing sits here, we had to move the playground a little bit further south. But the multi-purpose room, a little over 6,000 square feet, again, was not sized so much for the use for physical education and other uses, but it was sized so that, again, it accommodates the full population of the school in a storm condition. And that's not an unusual situation to size those. Now, when you look at that and compare it to the gymnasium, the basketball court is running in the north-south versus your current major court runs east-west. So you can get a perspective of size. It's not quite the same. Your existing is a little bit more square, but it's not too much smaller than what you currently have. Immediately north of that is the relocated from over here girls' locker room to this space right here. I should point out one other thing too while we're talking about the storm shelter. The storm shelter is required to have a directly accessible point of both boys and girls restroom here. There's a small mechanical room, and then the other thing that's kind of significant about this is this school will also have an emergency generator, and that is a requirement of the storm shelter. It will provide 1 hour of continuous power, and that's a minimum requirement should a storm or a tornado occur. The interesting thing or criteria about those shelters is they must be able to withstand the full impact of an EF5 tornado. In other words, the entire school could collapse, but this will stand. And that's one of the reasons why you have to have the emergency generators. area in blue, or maybe that's a sort of a, I guess we'll call it blue. That's the music expansion, and the music, the current music classroom is right here. And then currently we're using an older area up here for, I believe that's instrumental right now. So that is going to move around. So we're going to have instrumental band and choral music there. When we go to the second floor, we'll also talk about music, but before we leave this plan, I want to show then the area immediately above it, which is currently family and consumer science, and this is being developed into 2 larger classrooms, so that's an expansion. That's a renovation area, not a new addition to the building, but that's a renovation of the family and consumer science. The one to the north side is the food lab, and to the south is all of the other things that are in that program, but not specific to the food lab. Then the last item that I wanted to talk about on this floor plan is the expansion of the cafeteria. The current cafeteria stops right in this zone. So this sort of long, narrow area, it's about 2,000 feet of expansion. That increases that size so that when the 6th grade moves into the building, 6th grade can eat in one session in this, 7th grade will eat in one session, and 8th grade will eat in one session. And from what I know of middle schools, that's a good thing to have them broken up into those divisions. There are no requirements for expansion or modifications to either the kitchen or the serving areas that increased enrollment comes to Hickson.
I'd like to make mention of the existing office space, the admin, that's actually going to become counseling. So that layout provides perfect use for the counseling and meeting needs. And then also mention that the backup generator will be tied back into our existing servers also. So that can provide, that extra support if something does happen.
Is that generator just for the storm area?
It is. It is required because of the storm shelter, but as Rob said, it's significant because it has the capacity to still drive electric to some of the critical areas or needs of the school. So we will do that. It's a real small cost to wire that so that we can do that and take advantage of that generator. This is the second floor plan. Again, I won't labor too much over the academic wing. It is a mirror image of the first floor, with the exception that the way it was laid out, we were able to pick up one additional classroom. So that addition, rather than just having 12 classrooms as we thought we only needed, we found that we had enough area to pick up a bonus classroom. So we have actually 13 classrooms in that, for a total add, because on the second floor of over the administration area, there are a couple of more classrooms. So we have a total add of classrooms of 15 at Hickson. And I had mentioned that on the second floor, we're also renovating the areas just ever so slightly with finishes and new lighting. The 2 spaces that are above currently the family and consumer science, those will become dedicated to 6th grade music. The significant thing by our renovation of the music wing addition is that we will now have a stairway, a second stairway for a second means of egress from these 2. Currently, as you go up the stair, and it's a very small stair that goes up to those classrooms, but that's the only way that you can access those. So with the new addition, we're picking up a stair and a small, it's an elevator, it's a chairlift type elevator over there, but that area will become fully accessible. So that's where we are. Pam had gone over kind of the schedule. We're winding up actually the documents. We've got about 6 weeks to go before we finish and get the documents out onto the street. And there is a lot of interest, I can tell you, from contractors that we've spoken with. So we're excited to have the bidding period roll around real quick for us. Can I answer any questions?
I'm not sure that it goes to you or goes to John, but is the expectation then that 6th grade will be in this new area down the bottom here then?
I don't know if that's exactly been decided, but I think what I am thinking would probably best is and what I've heard is the 6th grade, the 8th grade would be in the new section.
Okay.
The 6th grade would be in the lower level of the existing session, which is closer to the administrators and a lot of the support services. And we were just thinking through from a logistically, as you're traveling through a school that has significant new and then some older, it'd be a nice way to kind of not start with the new and then go back to the old types of sections.
But you're keeping the idea that 6th grade will be sort of contiguous and doesn't
Yeah.
have to sort of interact. Back to your
Yeah.
comment about lunches, at separate times for separate groups and things like that. Go
Right.
ahead.
Yeah. So the 6th, again, I know Grace was just talking about the proximity to she and the support staff and the nurses and everything for the 6th graders new to the building.
Yeah, thank you.
I lost that image because I hit an arrow, but I was going to say that the way you described the grade level houses is exactly what Grace envisions. And almost all middle schools that I've ever done always have the youngest students closest to the administrative offices. So that does make sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just had a quick comment. As Mr. Huffman presented at a building advisory committee, I to really commend Pam and Rob Stuber in the ways that they've been not only engaging that committee, but working with the city and the state on this project. And I think it's just really a beautiful building, and it's going to make more sense looking at the building from the roads outside.
It will.
Yeah.
It definitely will.
We'll have an identity.
Right.
Like, we really will.
So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Afternoon, maybe afternoon, I'm not sure. But thank you again. My name is Mark Ruther with Owner Associates. I have Matt McDermott with me here as well, who works a lot on the day-to-day with the project. I'll be presenting package number 2. So I'm going to be going through 8 different schools. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of hit the big points of each one of the topics of each one of the schools. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, or I could get into a lot of comments, so I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, and if there's something in particular you want me to address when I get to a school, please address it. First building I'm going to talk about is the Avery Elementary School. It's a split-level school, 3-story school building at the corner of Bompart and Marshall Avenue, which I'm sure you know. It's a new 3-story elevator addition with a new 1-story secure accessible entrance from Bompart. And I'm going to go back and I'll kind of show you some things on the plan after I hit the topics. The elevator addition will be on the north side of the building between the original building and the multi-purpose room. The aesthetics, basically it'll be on the north side, but we're gonna match the brick pattern in the brick and the stone where it applies. So it's just gonna be seamless as far as the elevation and the aesthetics as we tie in. Square footage of the new addition is 770 square feet and 550 square feet of renovation. Proposed schedule for start of construction is June 2020, and completion in July 2021. So, as I said, right here, Marshall and Bompart is the access point. The front of the building, the main entrance. Over to the north is the elevator addition location where we'll be adding the
the elevator and lobby. These additions, the plans here are essentially for your reference as far as the existing buildings. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about those, but when you enter in off of Baum Park, there'll be a lobby. Just to your immediate left will be the elevator, which will take you up a level on the main to the main level. From the elevator, you will then come out. If it's a double loaded or a double door in the elevator cab, so you'll go in on the one level and then come out on another level on the south side. From there, you'll enter into an elevator lobby and then proceed then into the existing corridors. The classrooms on the main level, I've got those. They're essentially on the. I'm not going to go through every one of the classrooms and the impact on square footage, but on this particular case, you're 1,000 square feet on the lower classroom in the existing. By the time we come through the elevator lobby and into the corridor, we'll be at about 750 square feet in that space. They will be able to still come out of the classroom and have access to an existing toilet that will remain. When you come in the elevator and you go down to the lower level, again, it'll be a very similar situation. You'll come in on the upper level, the main level, go down to the lower level, come into the lobby, and then again back into an existing corridor. Go back up to the upper level, again, very same scenario, come in to an elevator lobby, then into the existing corridor. One of the things that just kind of on all the projects, all the schools, we have not gone in, we've tried to stay very focused on every one of these additions and where we're at and localize our efforts. We're not going in and trying to fix everything that we might see as you go down the existing corridors and that nature. To keep it in budget, we're very much staying in the areas we need to stay. We have met with the city and they're on board just to keep them informed on what we're doing with our consultants, electrical engineers and such. We still need to meet with Rock Hill, which we will do so in the next week or two, but just to keep them on board on what we're doing so they're not that blindsided by each one of these additions, because we are very concerned about the things we might uncover and the contingencies as we get into these buildings. Each building is a different situation. We're tying into a lot of different additions and things of that nature. So we'll go on to the next, Bristol. Bristol Elementary. Split level, 3-story building between Gray and Gore Avenue. Gore is on the east, Gray is on the west. New 3-story elevator addition with a new 1-story secured vestibule entrance from the rear parking lot area. The elevator addition on the east side of the building and will be on the east side of the building in the corner near the cafeteria and library. Brick color again will match and will just blend it in with the existing campus. Our goal is when we put these additions on, you won't even notice they're there. That's the goal, to try to match the brick, which obviously there's things, sometimes the bricks are a little bit harder to match than others, but we really work hard to match those. Square footage is 900 square feet of the new addition, 1,500 square foot renovation. Project schedule, start construction June 2021, completion August 2022. Again, very cool.
With that date, are those dates consistent?
So we're intentionally splitting up the start dates of some of these projects. Some of them are 2020, some of them are 2021. We didn't want to start all the projects this coming summer because it would have been overbearing.
Right, but you said, but it's not gonna get done till August of '22?
Correct. Because this one will start later.
Oh, okay.
Again, Gray and Gore back here on the east side. The front entrance of the building, we show that just for reference, but we did, when we were going through the locations of the elevator, what was it, 8 different locations? I think we looked
Tried
at,
to look at 8 different locations that would best serve the facility, and where we suggested or recommended to place that elevator is probably our only option due to the constraints that we found at all the other locations that we looked at, whether it was fire suppression main coming in from Gray, or a massive load-bearing concrete structural piece. This location is definitely the best and only location to actually connect all 3 floors.
so on the back side, there's the location off of the rear parking area is where we'll be installing and placing the elevator. A close-up location, or close-up photo. Then again, very similar, you'll come down on the lower, at the lower level elevator where you'll access into a lobby, and then directly to the right will be your elevator, which will take you up to the main level and the upper level. You will also be able to, from this location, go down steps, and we're maintaining the egress out of the cafeteria and the lower level, so that will remain along with an elevator access as well. Then after there, you'll go into the cafeteria. There'll be a low wall to get you into the existing corridor. We'll reduce that cafeteria space in there somewhat, but we did leave a low wall so that you're not completely shutting down that cafeteria. The cafeteria also extends over on the other side of the corridor, but we needed that access point to be able to get into the corridor. Next, when you come in, you come up to the main level. Very similar, you'll come up to a lobby. We have to carve out a little bit of the area out of a classroom to go from the lobby into the existing corridor. Likewise, on the upper level. We've limited how much we have to take out of those classrooms to maintain that classroom, and then we do have a door on the ends of those that can be for restricted access. Yes, go ahead.
So what's the reduction in the cafeteria space going to do in terms of the number of children that you can have eat lunch at the same time?
We got lucky in a sense because it doesn't reduce it at all, because that area that was taken up by that corridor aligns itself with some columns, and it's actually the space between the wall and where their tables actually start. So it's actually a walk lane as it is right now. So it doesn't impact their seating whatsoever.
What's the lunch day at Bristol currently?
I don't know that.
Is it one of these sort of start at 10:30 and go right the way,
It's longer, I don't know exactly.
Does any of the reduction of the classroom sizes affect the number of students?
No, as a matter of fact, we double checked with Kevin and made sure that we at least had our minimum square footage requirements for the size of the classrooms.
They still have, as on the drawings, they still have over 1,100 square foot on the other side.
Yes.
And so the classrooms, I mean, they should be fine in terms of the numbers, I would think, too.
And just to add to that, Rob's done a great job as far as when we had any types of those conversations. Because in these particular buildings, there's no place that we're not impacting classrooms on every one of the floors. So it's been a real challenge being able to go through and find the places that are, like we talked at a lot of these locations, in some cases we were cut down classrooms to a point where it was such a, impacting the classroom so much we couldn't even put the elevator there, because it's not only impacting one, it's impacting 3 classrooms. So there was a lot of study on this, and Rob had gone through and met with all of the principals to make sure we're providing them updates. Next is Stager. Oops. I'm sorry, Clark. I don't do much with my left hand, so. Clark, two-story building, school building off Big Bend Boulevard with an existing main entrance on the parking lot on the west side. There will be a new sidewalk connecting the parking lot and renovated secure accessible entrance on the east side. Renovated administration area for proximity to the reception and vestibule. Square footage is basically, it's all renovation space of 750 square foot. And again, project scheduled June 2021 and completion August 2021. Again, here's Big Bend, right here. Main entrance currently where they come in, the main entrance to the school, and you gotta go all the way down to the end of the east side. We are putting in a sidewalk on the north side to get you to the new secured entrance area. Just some pictures, that's the main office, revised entrance area. That's the existing entrance off of the parking lot currently. Front of the school off of Big Bend. And you have the new sidewalk location coming from the parking lot over to the new main entrance.
We still can't figure out why the existing main entrance is where it's at in proximity to the existing parking lot. It doesn't make sense, and unfortunately, the only fix to that is to put in a considerably long sidewalk. That was one of the questions that was asked.
Many times.
To get from point A to point B, it's gonna be a decent walk, so.
Well, also, so many people park in the church parking lot.
Correct.
That may be why the entrance is where it is.
Yeah, yep.
Well, before the security stuff came in also, you wouldn't just go in there. I mean, you'd come in at the side at the top. Before the gym addition, you'd come in down the bottom.
Yes.
I mean, I think this is just a reflection of, as we've concentrated down on a single point of entry. And that's really where a lot of it comes from as well.
Absolutely.
And then obviously just, there's steps down on that end, obviously, and that's where we gotta go all the way, I'm sorry, down here. That's where we gotta go all the way to the secured entrance. The secured entrance then, you come into a hardened area vestibule. There's a pass-through window into the office area. New principal's office, a nurse with a toilet right off of the nurse's area.
So will drop off and pick up be the same though?
Any other questions on Clark?
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
I may have misheard you. You said the start date for this was 6/21 and the end date was 8/21? Was that?
August 2021, yeah. June 2021 to August 2021.
So this one is only a couple
Yeah,
months, where the other
yeah.
one was like.
This one is not nearly as
Oh, I see.
much to do. Now, obviously, and Rob and I, we talked about this, as we go out for bid and we get a contractor, if there's something, you'll be informed if there any reason, if a contractor looks at us, we can get this done at a certain time and we can help our schedule without impeding the classes and things of that nature. We'll listen to them if they've got good ideas to approach these projects, because the goal is, it'll be one contractor. We think we can get the best bang for our buck by having one contractor do all of these, because there's certain things, they may get started on the elevator, and that'll slow down until they come out of the ground and get the elevator on site, so they can be doing other things throughout the different buildings. So that'll be something that's gonna be somewhat fluid, but working with Rob, the principals will always be informed about what's going to be going on.
And I know it might not be realistic, but it would, if it's able to be moved up with no sacrifice, I'm just thinking of mainly the accessibility piece, just with, that was a big priority, obviously, and at those 3 schools.
And we have to supply them within the bid specs suggested time frames.
Yeah.
Yes.
Once we get the contractors on board, that's gonna be a huge part of the discussion is the actual construction schedule collectively or at each site.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And in some cases, the contractors will use that to their advantage. Each one of the contracts, when they're bidding the project, how many superintendents am I gonna have on 8 schools? Or I'm grouping them here. That'll be a huge thing to talk about, but as Rob said, we've gotta put something in for all of them to bid the parameters of the project.
Cool.
Can you remind me of the completion date of the Avery? It was the first one.
July 2021. Next,
Just
Stager.
on the Clark one, did you give any thought, and I realize it'll be much more construction, did you give any thought to taking the existing side entrance and just blowing that up and putting more construction in there as an alternative?
It would have, the size needed, we would have pumped way out into the parking area. Plus, there's also a significant amount of underground storage for sanitary and storm sewer piping under there, which we wouldn't have been able to build on.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Next building is Steger Grade Center. 2-story school building off Rock Hill Road with an existing main entrance on the south side. Going to put in a new accessible ramp to access the renovated main secured accessible entrance. Remove a portion of the wine rack appearance for the ramp access to the existing porch. That name just keeps coming through with all of the terminologies as we do the, remove the dilapidated stairs, knee walls, handrails, and replace with new stairs and guardrails and handrails to increase sight lines. Vestibule interior windows and check-in window to be removed and replaced with the drywall and a bullet-resistant check-in window. Square footage is 150 square foot of renovation. Project schedule June 2021 and completion August 2021. So this one, there's not a lot of interior that we're doing, but again, Rock Hill, come in off of the south entrance. Right here is the main entrance to Steger. Just some pictures here to, whoops, wrong way. Main entrance, the steps that we'll be removing, accessible ramp. Here's another picture of the ramp, the existing ramp, and then the so-called wine rack facade that we're going to have to take out a portion to be able to access the office, and then some interior views of the vestibule east and west wall. Here is the ramp. We're going to utilize the existing ramp here. We had looked at some options to come directly up, but I can't meet the handicap accessibility ratios coming from this point here up. So we had to go up, pick up a mid-landing, and then come up with a scissors back ramp to get to that elevated cantilevered ramp here, or portion of the building, to then be able to come across. It'll have a handrail there. You'll come across the platform to a new stairs that will come up and down here to the entrance right here with, again, a pass-through window. Pretty straightforward. Took us a while to get to that point with the ramp, but in order to make the grades work, that's what we needed to do there. Next building. Edgar Road. Split level 2-story building off Edgar Road. New 2-story elevator addition with a new one-story secured accessible entrance from the parking lot on the north side. Again, brick color and pattern to match the existing building facade. Square footage, 750 square feet, new addition, and 250 square foot of renovation. A new accessible ramp to access the renovated main secured accessible entrance. Project schedule, start construction June 2020, completion July 2021. Again, here's the main entrance. This area right off the loop. That is the main entrance area, the securable entrance. Again, an aerial of the location of the elevator, where the elevator will go. Close-up of the elevator location. Again, the main entrance. Existing floor plans here. Existing main entrance that will remain. We're putting an accessible ramp up to that area, put in a hardened area. There's an existing pass-through window now, and we'll add a hardened door there. This is one we're still looking at. We'd like to talk and review with Rob at our next meeting, just potentially maybe save some dollars, but also when we're out doing field work, the principal asked, is there a possibility of moving that back, that set of doors back here, so we have a little bit more of a lobby? So we will look at that. Another thing, as Don had mentioned, our plans are likewise, these are fluid. Every time we come out and have another meeting, things change. And I noticed that this space right here, this is not in the works. This was something early on in the project. We talked about a potential area with budget-wise and things that just did not work into the mix.
Where are you on that, Mark?
This right here, there was
We have a conference room, a suggested conference room right by the new side entrance vestibule.
Okay.
And I just wanted, we had not taken off of this set of drawings, I just wanted to bring that to you. There's just a few things like that that we've not on the plans as we update the original drawings, or the new drawings.
Let me mention one special condition at Edgar. Edgar is similar to Clark on one end where they have the multiple levels. Here at Edgar, they actually have between, I think it was 5 to 8 different elevation changes just as you go down the stairs. So that's almost an impossibility to connect every single one of those rooms by a single elevator shaft. So in coordination efforts with Julie, she actually chose which rooms she wanted connected, and those are the ones that are directly underneath the cafeteria, which are indicated on this plan.
Yeah, let me hit that real quick. You'll come in here on the main level here, go to your immediate right, have the elevator lobby, you go up to the current lounge and you'll come through, or you'll go down to the lower level, and those are art classroom and another classroom.
Just as a side note also, not only do these new elevator lobbies have the mag lock, the A-phone, the secure double doorways, but the elevator is going to be both key operated and fob operated. We found that it can be fob operated for the entrance too. So the elevator itself will be a secured opening.
Will the technology, Rob, I know we talked about at one point still be in place where a receptionist would be able to make that elevator accessible?
It's really issuing the cards and or the use of a key. So in some instances, somebody might have to go and
Let somebody
assist
in.
operation of that elevator. Now, in discussion with all the principals that are getting elevators at the buildings, once a month maybe, it's not a daily, hourly type of occurrence.
Right.
Not to lessen the need.
Right.
But it's not an often occurrence.
Kind of like the high school, using it based on need.
Exactly.
Next building,
What was the completion date of that?
that was June 2020. to July 2021.
Can I ask one more question about this Edgar Road one, because I think I'm confused. There's an accessible ramp that goes to the current main office that's gonna be secured, but the secure accessible entry is over on the side?
On the last one,
Yeah.
yeah, basically, the main entrance will have an accessible entry from the drop-off point and parking. That was really the main reasons, because that's where the office is and also where the parking is. So you'll come in that area, but if you have to use the elevator to get up or down on those, the other end of the building, you'll go in and go up or down on that, but it will be accessible from that point.
You'll be able to go in through the main entry and go down and utilize the elevator. Or you could go around to the parking lot.
So it has two accessible
Yes,
entries?
ma'am.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things, I was waiting till Linda introduce it, but, and Rob jump in. One of the things with like at Avery and Bristol and Edgar Road is that at each of the main entrance, the main facing, or the one the majority of people will go through, there'll be also like at Avery, a secure kind of vestibule. Now, we don't have the space to have a human being down there coming face to face, but we're gonna have technology, including a Raptor system, where the office personnel will be able to check in the people, see the people from that entrance, and we'll do the same thing down in that elevator area. So you'll be able to walk through the door, maybe buzz through, but then you'll be able to get checked in and then utilize the
The
office.
exterior door will be a payphone, so it has a camera to it. They'll come in, and either opening zone Raptor, get identified. The second set of doors is actually a controlled mag lock. So once they go through the Raptor, then we can either allow them in or not.
So they'll still go through the current main entrance primarily?
Yes.
So what, yeah. And the majority of
Unless you need
people,
the
and
elevator.
Kevin Starks, kudos to Kevin, because he's been wanting to make it just, how can we make it equitable and not just seem like you, because you're physically unable to do this main one, because there's not gonna be like a ramp up to it,
You're
like
talking
you go.
Avery.
At Avery,
Bristol,
yeah.
probably.
At Avery and Bristol. And so, not designated one as like main or anything like that, but these are the two ways that
Right.
once the school day starts, you can get in. And so that people can access, and the majority are gonna come through the front,
Right.
but
I'm
it
just
wouldn't
thinking it's
preclude.
not confusing.
Right,
There'll be some sign or something that says
Yes.
accessible entry.
Mhm.
yeah.
Signage on the exterior.
Wayfinding is gonna be really important at both Avery and Bristol and
Will there be, remind me, in the elevator entrances, vestibules, at each of the locations, will there also be stairs or not? Or is that just in one, I thought I saw that at some point, on Bristol maybe.
definitely at Bristol. Now, that's a good point, because that takes you to different
Yeah.
elevations also.
Yeah,
Wherever there's a door within that vestibule, first, second, third floor, along with the elevator.
yeah,
Those will be secure doors,
okay.
yeah.
Well, are there stairs at Avery or Edgar Road? I don't remember them in this.
Where was that? Secure
The
doors?
stairs will stay at Edgar.
Yes.
It's just Bristol that has the stairwell because of the need egress, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
The cafeteria.
Cafeteria.
And the other three floors.
So if I'm in Edgar and just me, myself, I'm in Edgar and I need to go into the door and I need to do a Raptor, can I go in that side entrance and then not utilize the elevator, but utilize the stairs from that point?
Once you get through this security
Yeah,
level.
yeah, that's what I was just
you can
wondering.
utilize-
Yes.
You can utilize that stairwell.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
That's what I was
Without
wondering.
eliminating the stairwell.
Yeah, cool.
Next is Hudson. Two-story school building off Hudson Road. New main entrance to be raised to the main level elevation. The main door will be replaced with a new door, and the vestibule will be at the same elevation as the main level. That's pretty significant change there, but we're going out and modifying steps and things of that nature. Renovated administration area for proximity to the reception and the vestibule. Square footage, 850 square foot of renovation. Project schedule, start construction 2021 to completion of August 2021. Okay, and again, this is Hudson. You have your main entrance here. exterior stairs, that's the main entrance you can look at with the wall on the left-hand side. These doors here will come out and we will actually raise this up to about here or so to bring, so because when you walk in there currently there's steps. Those will come out and everything will be raised. Vestibule and adjacent area. So here's where that existing, the steps are right in this area right here. We're now going to come in, these steps will be replaced and there'll be a new ramp. That wall shown here looks like it's in, but that wall will go away. And as we got through the details, this ramp moves a little bit to the side here away so that there's no wall that anybody can hide behind or things of that nature. It's as much of a security issue as anything. So you'll come up that ramp or the steps to a landing here that goes directly in. You have a pass-through window, a general office, waiting area, small conference room, and then 2 offices. This was one where working with the staff, it was very beneficial. They were great to work with, like all of them, but this particular case, if you remember early on in the stages, we were completely renovating this area to bring in, and we moved some things around, or the principal moved some things around and used this as a special ed, and the walls and everything stayed in the existing locations. So that whole area right there kind of went away as a renovation. So it was just some dollars saved. Just by moving things around, it saved some costs. So, but pretty straightforward here, but the significance is you're coming directly in on the main level.
So, I'm sorry, so what will the current office move into?
So let me grab
Go
this one. The classroom that is all the way down the hallway to the left, and yeah, that one, go ahead and put in classroom mark up top. That is right now being used for specials. So it's kind of carved up a little bit. Through discussion with Lisa, she's going to go ahead and take the classroom that is now going to be the new office space, relocate it down into that classroom at the end of the hallway, and then specials will be going back into the existing office space, which the layout in itself just offers it to it's a default. You know, it's perfect room sizes and everything.
Great.
Next, Walter Ambrose.
That was an adventure, wasn't it?
Yeah, this one was an adventure. And there's some things here that have never really, have not gotten updated, because this is one of the last ones we've been working on to revise. So if you need an updated plan, Rob, we will do that for you, but we were really concentrating on updating the contract documents. But single-story early learning center at the corner of Cedar Avenue and Gray Avenue. New vestibule to be secured accessible entrance. New accessible ramp to access the renovation main secured accessible entrance. Renovated administration area for proximity to reception and vestibule. And then renovated the multi-purpose space where the office suite was moving from. And then square footage of that renovation, new is 550 square feet, and renovation is 2,000 square feet. Project schedule, May 2020, completion August 2020. So let me go down here a little bit. Okay, the proposed new addition here, off of the loop, right here. So that's just a site plan. Main entrance as it appears currently. Canopy. Existing windows in the proposed office area and existing office area. So in this particular, this is one where this area here, the lobby has grown a little bit, and we've got a canopy that connects right here. So this area did grow a little bit. in order to be able to have a drop-off in the afternoon or evening or whatever, to have a drop-off area so that people can come and drop off
They have
tuition and
a need
things.
for a secured lockbox, because there's a lot of parents that drop off checks and so on and so forth at all hours. It just runs off a different schedule than the rest of the buildings do.
And then you'll have two offices, the general administration area, conference room, and then a nurse in this area right here. The existing area right here, which was the office area, will be converted into a multi-purpose space with an office and the toilet we've made handicap accessible, so we've enlarged that toilet for ADA accessibility. That's that on that one.
Can I ask a question about Hudson?
Yeah.
Do they have an existing elevator?
They do not.
They don't, but they have ways for folks to get up and down. They have chairlift
Chairlift.
systems. Good question. They got two of them, actually.
All right, something you wanted to hear. The last plan to look at is the high school, Webster Groves High School. Two-story school building off of Selma Avenue. Existing main vestibule with a will be renovated to be a secured entrance with an interior pair of doors. Renovated administration area for a new secure check-in window. Square footage of renovation is 250 square feet. Project schedule June 21 to completion of August 2021. This one, and a lot of work and a lot of study on this one because we were looking at trying to get, well, first I'll start here with Selma and the accessible entrance off of the lower level.
It's part of the North Addition project.
Main entrance, main stairs, vestibule doors in the interior vestibule, and then the vestibule entry, which this is where we will put doors. We really want to try to we'll tie them into the appearance and not try to take away from the beautiful lobby there. It's a very nice lobby, so we'll work with really tying that in. But one of the things we had looked at were, here's the main entrance, and then you had the other entrance down here. This got flipped around on me. And so what we were doing, we'd be coming in here.
Mark, you were right. To the right is the North Addition.
Right here, right there, yes, I'm sorry. So you come in here for handicap accessibility, get an elevator and go down to the main door. Or we were going to look at putting a ramp from out here all the way up to this elevation. There was just no easy, effective way, appearance-wise, cost-wise, to do that. Utilities in this area were, so basically, and we did a sketch, shared that with Robin, he was able to share that, so that just to kind of put that behind us, so that we're really just looking then at maintaining this accessible entrance here, coming in for ADA, then coming, but that will still maintain, the main entrance will still be the main entry to the building.
One also, another factor I know Rob shared was just the safety and security, which you mentioned you were mindful of at Hudson. And we also, with all the projects, like both of the gentlemen have said, has tried to maintain the architectural integrity, tie it in. And we got beautiful buildings. And so when we looked at the drawing that Rob showed of what the ramp would have to look like, I mean, it would go a considerable distance right out in front of Webster Groves High School. Like a big old ramp would have to go way down, and it's like, this looks
It would have been anywhere
silly.
from 5 to 6 feet of an exposed concrete wall
Yeah.
right to the left of the stairs, the main entrance stairs. Then there would have been this monstrous gap on the backside of the ramp between the ramp and the building to where those windows were. It was just too much of
And how long was it? It was,
a, 110 feet.
It was 115 feet, I
Especially
believe.
bad weather.
And not,
Somebody
and went
over here
6,
to do that is not.
it went total 6'8" feet, I believe. And then the worst case was, here we're doing this for security, we have to keep the windows, as Rob said, we have to keep the window wells open. So now we're creating this ramp out in the front that does not look good, that now you have a place for people to hide behind. So it just kind of worked its way out, but
Yeah.
we had to go through the study just so we had the information about you to be able to respond if there was any. Matt or Rob, is there anything I missed on any particular school?
So I do want to mention the lobby at the high school. The archway is, to me, it's significant to that entrance of the high school, especially since it's where you go to enter the auditorium. The plan for, our plan was to go ahead and install that second set of vestibule doors farther toward the actual exterior doors to maintain that archway. We don't even want to touch that archway. It's beautiful, it's oak. So we'll make sure that we're real conscious of that.
And we will look at that, we'll have some sketches, provide some sketches to Rob to go over. We just want to respect that area, it's just a beautiful entrance to the entrance of the building. Yes?
I've had a couple of people ask me, ironically, about delivery areas. Are there any, is there any thought to how delivery areas are going to be more secure?
And each facility?
Yeah, well, first question was mainly about the high school, but
The
then
high school
other
does
people
have designated delivery on the backside. It has a secured loading dock, meaning not only the loading dock door, but the pedestrian door is keypad. It also has a button that causes the office to let them know that there is a delivery. Plus, we have cameras there too.
One other thing I wanted to add, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just like focusing on the elementary school. Any of your designs change the capacity of them? So some of them shrunk some of the classrooms, but that would be the thing. But if you eliminate any classrooms, that would affect the capacity of those schools. Even at Hudson, where you put the classroom for the.
Yeah, if you were to go into that first classroom, once you get into going to 11, it's quite spacious. He's got, I think, 3 couches lined up in the middle of the floor. He is more than open to moving down to that other classroom. So he knows he can take his classroom to 5th down.
If I remember correctly, that room, the interior wall was taken out, so it was essentially 2
It
classes.
used to be 2 classrooms.
So you did take that classroom, right?
Basically 2 classrooms.
Doesn't that affect the capacity of the building?
No.
No, I would say his classroom right now is oversized.
It was twice the size that it really needed to be.
But if you're then taking it for an office, doesn't that mean you're just not using your art, you just took 2 classrooms?
This is probably an offline conversation. We can talk further on it.
Here's that existing area, right here. So it was a larger classroom. That room here, moving down here, it was oversized for what it needed to be, what it was used for. That'll move here. These spaces will move there, and that will move there.
You have 3 existing spaces, and all you're doing is rotating in different parts of the building.
And to be honest, well, that space right there was oversized for what it was currently being used for.
Plus the room that is currently being used as special, that's a full-size classroom, but there's maybe 3 people in there at any one point in time. So moving that down equates to swapping classroom space.
Okay?
Can I ask a clarification question about the high school? So it says main entry now in the accessible entrance, which is on this north
You're
side
right.
of the building. If it's after the start of school, and I'm wanting to go to the school, that's the entrance I would use? Or would I still go to, if I could use stairs, the main entrance?
Main
current
entrance, main entrance.
So will that entrance will that all be secure as well?
Yeah.
I don't see that on here.
It's kind of like just like at Avery, Edgar Road, and Bristol.
Uh-huh.
Same thing at the high school, where this will have a secure setup on this north side during the day, because it doesn't, like right now you have to buzz outside and stuff like that, but it'll have something during the day that you can access it from and get raptored in and all that kind of stuff. But in all the schools, you'll still be able to walk through the main doors and get checked in. You just won't at Avery and Bristol be directly face to face with somebody. It'll all be through cameras and technology in the Raptor system. Does that answer?
Yeah, I might have skipped over this, but this will have a check-in at the high school. You'll come in, these will be hardened or secured. You'll go to a check-in right here.
And that's
That's the high school.
that's where it says main entry, or
Yeah.
is that where it is currently?
This is where it is currently.
Currently.
Is that the senior entrance technically?
It is,
Right.
yeah.
And what happens to junior entrance then? Because people still go through that in the mornings.
Well, still in the mornings, it'll still be open, because it's not secure. So
Yeah.
as long as staff's there, you'll still go through junior
Okay.
entrance. But kind of once the day starts, right now, you have to go through the
Right.
middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Grace.
And the elevator at the high school, will that be key?
We are going to switch that from a typical button operation to the fob and
Okay.
key. We found out that technology was available to retrofit our existing elevators. so
Nice.
Bonus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here, and I like this. This shows it good, just because you walk in, and then you'll get kind of that face-to-face check-in, and then SRO will be right here, and then here's where you kind of cross through that threshold. So they're
Yes.
looking to, again, how can we move this, like Rob said, we talked about the other day, maintain that archway. Do we keep it there? Do we try to move that archway? And then you'll enter like that auditorium if you walk straight. It's kind of like here too.
Yeah.
See that?
So right now, where that screen is, that just has the, when you
Yes,
first walk into
yes,
your left, that
yes.
screen, that's where.
Yep.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob, Pam, do you guys want to add anything related to these big
So,
projects?
Yeah, let me touch base on one item. All exterior doors and windows, all interior doors and windows, as we were going through design, it got pretty complex as to what to do with them, because I think everybody here knows that you've got hundreds of different types and styles and configurations. We've decided to pull addressing the window and door openings out to a separate package. What that does is allows us to go out and get on board with either 3M that has the impact resistant film, or a local glazer or something to help better plan how we're going to address all these openings. Plus, it also saves us money in the long run, because we're not having the GC mark it up another 10% or so and so forth. But we're currently underway working on that, is how we address the glass, the doors, the openings, so on and so forth. So that's still another component of design package number 2 that we're under consideration. Because we're finding out with these impact resistant films, and I don't want to say bullet, I don't want to use the word bullet ever, is impact resistant. That technology really came out of the hurricane issues. They use these films a lot in the southern states, near the water, the Gulf, Florida. But we're finding a real wide range of capabilities and cost associated with these films. And also the durability, the longevity of some of these films is only 7 to 10 years. And I know that we don't want to go through and redo our windows in another 7 or 10 years. So it's been eye-opening, and we're going to make sure we make the right decision or recommendations to you guys. More than likely, it'll be a multitude of things. We could take out some glass and put some insulated panels, because first and foremost, it's really a sightline issue more than a penetration issue. So it could be a combination of metal panels replacing some of the lower windows, the application of some impact-resistant film. Impact-resistant film comes in a wide variety of capabilities also. So there's a lot to think about as far as that goes, but just want to let you know we're still working on that.
I know there's concern with the impact-resistant films for fire.
Yes.
Are we consulting with someone?
Yes, we are.
Show not impact.
That's an excellent point, because I just want to make one observation, is that all of this safety, security issues that are really being thrust upon us, there's not a whole lot in either the building codes or with regards to fire departments. There's this big gap that's trying to come together, because if you think about these impact-resistant films, that blocks the firemen from getting through an opening. You're talking with the firemen, first and foremost, they'll try to access through a door. But if they can't, and they have to get through a window, lo and behold, there's this impact-resistant film on the window. So it's tricky. It's a trick bag. So I hope that in the near future, we've had conversations with the city planner and the building department and the fire marshal. They even noticed the need for somewhere in the near future to get together and start talking about this stuff.
Have a meeting somewhere.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I ask about the gates that are on the street outside of the high school? Are those a security measure?
Those were put in quite a long time ago. I've been here for 15 years and never here when I got here. I can't really remember the reason why they were installed. I know
There was a
more than
shooting.
not, it
There were shots fired.
shots fired and also traffic.
Kathy, do you want to tell the history?
They were actually installed, I want to say 70s, because the principal then was convinced there were drug dealers that were looking around, driving around like kids, and so.
Wasn't there shooting though?
There was, but down there.
That was after they were installed? All right,
It
sorry.
is a great
That's wrong.
way, even currently, to control that.
Great.
I mean, that's a nice wide thoroughfare.
I was just wondering, given that they're 40-something years old, are they still in the right places?
Yes, yes, yes. They actually went perfectly through the entire uses to block off most of the area in front of the high school. Along with that, we have our lock. The fire department even has their own lock on it in case they have to get out. So it's everybody's on the same page.
I have a question regarding the completion dates. Is the Bristol project finishing in '22 allowing for just getting the districts basically completed as quickly as possible, or is there a way to move that up and still have everything done in '21?
Yeah, we'll make sure that once we get the contractor on board, I guarantee us something will change. We would like to start earlier on all the projects. It's a matter of how do we spread out all those projects, do them efficiently, so on and so forth. The Bristol project itself also has a couple other components to where we're going to be expanding the back parking lot, moving the fence line, creating a double parking lot back there. In and around the area where the elevator is going, we're actually going to we're going to take the trees out because they're starting to fail and rot and impact the building. But we're going to create actually ADA designated drop off there with parking also. So we could start earlier on stuff like that. But
The other thing too on that one, there's a little bit more restriction, egress coming out of the lower level. We have to maintain that. So we won't be able to stress enough having a contract. There'd be that other team player to be able to say, no, I like moving these things around, to be able to try to increase their schedule, to be able to be less impactful on the school.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for the abundant information and for the good questions, and very much appreciated. I think this is very informative. I feel really comfortable about where we are. In the interest of time and giving full attention to strategic planning, would anyone like to make a motion to table the strategic planning update to a later meeting?
To the next one.
I motion to move the strategic.
To table it.
Yeah, to table 2.04 strategic planning update
Okay.
to a later.
Keita so moved.
Second.
Or whatever.
Okay, all those in favor?
Second.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Now I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I will make a motion to approve consent agenda items 3.02 minutes from the December 9th meeting, as well as agenda item 3.03 for personnel reports.
Okay. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in
Go.
favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you all.